Ross Draven could barely see through the windshield as the wipers struggled against the pounding rain. Streetlights washed the deserted road with a pale yellow glow, flickering like ghosts every time lightning slashed the sky. He was supposed to return home from his business trip the next morning, but a canceled meeting let him leave a day early. He was tired yet oddly restless, a nagging sensation creeping up his spine as he pulled onto his quiet suburban street. The storm outside raged with a fury that matched Ross's growing unease. It wasn't just the unexpected darkness of the hour or the sheets of water hammering his car. It was the strange sedan parked outside his house. It flashed silver under the street lamp, unfamiliar and foreboding. He slowed down, feeling his chest tighten. Who could possibly be visiting at this time in weather like this? Lightning illuminated the two-story home. Ross noticed that not all the lights were off, even though Miranda, his wife, had texted him earlier saying she'd head to bed early with their daughter, Chloe. The front porch light was still burning, and from the second-floor windows a faint glow flickered like a warning. Ross killed the engine and got out. Within seconds he was soaked. Rainwater sloshed around his ankles as he stepped onto the driveway. He pulled his collar up, heart hammering, thoughts rushing. Maybe it's just a friend, someone in trouble, he wondered, but the pit in his stomach said otherwise. "Miranda?" he called out the moment he pushed open the front door. Only the dull hum of the air conditioner answered. "Honey, I'm home earlier than expected." He flicked on the hallway light, dumping his overnight bag by the stairs. The house felt heavy with silence. Normally he'd hear Chloe's laughter or the muffled sound of the TV, but tonight nothing. A subtle dread took root inside him. The only noise was the distant rumble of thunder, echoing like an omen. Ross climbed the stairs, each creak of the steps amplified by the hush of the storm. Flickers of lightning burst through the window at the far end of the hallway, revealing wet footprints on the carpet. Someone else is here, he realized. His pulse spiked. At the bedroom door, he froze. A soft moan slipped through the crack, definitely not the TV. His stomach dropped. He could feel the blood pounding in his ears. The idea formed in his mind before he could stop it. She's not alone. He pushed the door ajar. In the flash of lightning, Ross saw them. Miranda, his wife of nearly 7 years, entangled with a man he recognized from a photo on her phone, Axel Kincaid. They were so lost in each other, they didn't even notice him at first. The bed creaked, sheets tangled around bare legs. Ross's vision tunneled with rage. "What the hell?" Ross's voice came out raw, guttural. Miranda jolted upright, gasping. Axel shot a wild stare over his shoulder. The lampshade toppled to the floor with a crash. Outside, thunder boomed in angry reply. "Ross!" Miranda's voice was a mixture of shock and defiance. She scrambled, covering herself with the blanket. Axel, half-naked, tried to grab his pants from the side table. Ross advanced, teeth clenched, fists shaking so violently he thought he might punch through a wall. "You—" He didn't finish his sentence. Instead, he yanked Miranda away from Axel by her hair. She screamed, her nails clawing at his forearm. Axel lunged to protect her, but Ross swung him around, shoving him hard. The thunder outside seemed to magnify the chaos, lightning exposing the raw betrayal in strobe-like bursts. Rain hammered against the window, as if urging Ross to unleash all of his fury. In that moment, he let it all out. "You're in my bed?" Ross shouted, voice cracking with heartbreak and rage. "With my wife?" Miranda shrieked. "Get off me!" Her voice turned shrill, layered with anger and perhaps a twisted embarrassment at being caught. "Ross, stop it!" Axel tried to push Ross back, but Ross shoved him onto the floor. A mirror by the dresser clattered to the ground and shattered. Shards of glass scattered across the carpet, shining like deadly confetti in the lightning's glow. "Stop, Ross, you're hurting me!" Miranda cried, tears streaking her face. But Ross's hand remained tangled in her hair, the betrayal burning in his eyes. Axel, breath ragged, snatched up his phone from the nightstand. "I'm calling the cops!" he yelled, fear and aggression woven together in his tone. Ross, chest heaving, glanced at the phone in disbelief, as though it dawned on him how badly this could end. Seconds later, red and blue lights started to dance through the window, blending with the white glare of lightning. The neighbors must have heard the commotion and called the police. Or maybe Axel had dialed 911 quicker than Ross realized. The sirens wailed closer, piercing the storm. A figure in a rain-drenched uniform appeared at the bedroom door. Officer Gomez, a younger cop with a determined set to his jaw. He raised a hand, signaling Ross to step back. Another officer hovered behind him, flashlight beam cutting through the half-lit room. Miranda twisted away from Ross's grip, gasping for breath. Axel pressed a palm to his ribs, wincing. All at once, Ross felt the weight of everything collapsing. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the violence that now left him cornered under the watchful eyes of the law. Gomez's voice was firm. "Sir, let her go and put your hands where I can see them." In the distance, thunder rolled. Ross slowly released Miranda's hair, stepping back with trembling hands. Rain drummed relentlessly against the windows, a harsh applause to the tragedy unfolding. He stood there, drenched in heartbreak and anger, looking from Miranda to Axel and back again. Everything is over, he thought, his eyes burning with tears he refused to shed. In that single, shattering instant, Ross Draven knew his life would never be the same. Ross blinked under the harsh fluorescent lights of the police station. His clothes were damp, still clinging to him from the storm. He was cuffed to a metal bench, a half-empty styrofoam cup of water balanced beside him. The echo of Miranda's screams and Axel's furious shouting still reverberated through his mind. Officer Gomez and his partner, Officer Dane, had separated everyone at the scene. Miranda remained upstairs, sobbing to a female cop who led her away. Axel, sporting a bruise on his cheek, spat accusations at Ross while paramedics checked his ribs. By the time Ross was escorted downstairs, every neighbor on the block seemed to be peering through their curtains. Now he waited, knee bouncing in anxious, angry pulses. He tried to calm down, but his mind kept replaying that awful moment when he pushed open his bedroom door. It felt more like a twisted nightmare than real life. How long has this been going on? He wondered, jaw tight. Why? Where was Chloe? A door slammed open, jolting Ross from his thoughts. Officer Gomez, drenched to the bone, walked in. "Ross Draven?" he asked, though he obviously knew the answer. Ross nodded wordlessly. Gomez pulled out a small notepad. "We have witness statements and a call to dispatch reporting domestic violence in progress. The alleged victim, Miranda Turner." "She's my wife," Ross interrupted, his voice low. "Right. Your wife says you attacked her and Mr. Kincaid without provocation." Ross felt a surge of indignation. "Without provocation. I came home to find them in my—" He swallowed the rest of the sentence, not wanting to shout it in the station corridor. Gomez cleared his throat. "Look, man, I don't know all the details, but I do know what I saw when I arrived. You were yanking her hair, the other guy was on the floor. There was broken glass, overturned furniture. It looked bad." "Officer, you don't understand," Ross began, desperation cracking through his tone. "Maybe not, but it's still my job to take you in. The rest will get sorted out by a judge." Gomez scribbled notes, then jerked his head at the bench. "We're booking you on suspicion of domestic assault. Axel Kincaid's pressing charges. And your wife, well, she's telling us you've got anger issues." Ross shut his eyes, fighting the rush of guilt and fury. A sliver of him knew how it must have appeared. The adrenaline pounding in his veins had made him reckless. He remembered Miranda's tear-streaked face and felt a stabbing pang in his chest, pain mixed with betrayal. Soon, a female officer arrived to take Ross's statement. Her nameplate read, C. Vasquez. She asked routine questions in a monotone. "How long have you been married? Did you strike your wife prior to us arriving? Were there any weapons involved?" Ross answered through clenched teeth, repeating how he caught them in flagrante. She wrote it all down, expression flat. When they'd finished, Officer Vasquez uncuffed him from the bench but replaced the cuffs behind his back. "Sorry, but rules are rules," she murmured. Ross was led to a narrow holding cell, the bars cold against his shoulder when he stepped inside. The clang of the metal door was final, like a verdict. Shivering under the flickering overhead light, he realized he had no idea where Chloe was. He had assumed she was asleep in her room during the altercation, but the police had taken him away before he could even ask. Fear replaced anger as he pictured his little girl in the same house as Axel Kincaid. "Hey," he called to the officer standing guard outside. "My daughter Chloe Draven, do you know if she's all right?" The guard, an older man with a wiry mustache, glanced down at a clipboard. Ma'am says the child wasn't home. Some sleepover arrangement, apparently. That revelation pummeled Ross with relief and dread at once. Miranda must have sent Chloe to a friend's house so she could do this. His stomach churned at the thought. Hours dragged by. At one point, Travis Ross's co-worker showed up at the station, apparently awakened by a frantic call from Ross's mother, Beatrice. Travis tried to speak with the desk sergeant about bail, but it was the middle of the night, the storm still raging, and there wasn't much to be done until a judge set conditions the next day. Ross sank onto the narrow bench in the cell, exhaustion settling over him. All he could see in his mind's eye was Miranda's face, twisted with a mixture of guilt and hatred. And beyond that, all he could feel was a terrible, endless sense of loss. He pressed his forehead to the cold bars. What if I just walked away? He thought bitterly. But the image of Axel's hands on Miranda burned too fiercely. He shut his eyes, waiting for morning, and the reality that soon, everything he once knew would crumble around him. 2 days later, after the bail hearing, Ross Draven stepped out of the county courthouse feeling like a hollow shell. Rain no longer poured from the sky, but it might as well have. A dull, gray chill hung in the air, matching his mood. He held the crumpled bail receipt in one hand, the other gripping his phone, waiting for any word about Chloe. Travis, who had posted part of the bail alongside Ross's parents, patted Ross on the shoulder. "It'll be okay, buddy," he offered, but his voice lacked conviction. "Get home, rest. We'll figure out how to sort this out." Ross just nodded. With no car, his sedan remained impounded as part of the police investigation. He hitched a ride with a local taxi. The driver tried to make small talk, but Ross's curt replies soon silenced him. All Ross wanted was to see Chloe, to figure out how this marriage had exploded so violently. When the cab pulled up to Ross's house, Ross realized something was terribly off. The front door stood ajar, the living room lights blazing. He rushed in, ignoring the driver's startled protest about the fare. Inside, the place was ransacked. Drawers hung open, clothes flung everywhere, pictures missing from the walls. "Miranda!" he called out. No answer. He ran upstairs to Chloe's room. The bed was stripped, closet empty, no sign of the stuffed unicorn he'd bought her on her last birthday. Terror spiked. Did something happen to them? He stumbled back down to the living room, heart hammering. That's when he spotted a single legal-sized envelope propped on the coffee table, weighted down by a decorative paperweight. Ross was scrawled across it in Miranda's handwriting. He tore it open, scanning the short note. "I've taken Chloe to stay somewhere safe. Don't try to follow us. I've filed for divorce, and the lawyers will handle the rest. This marriage is over." Beneath it lay official documents. A petition for divorce, allegations of spousal abuse, a request for a protective order. Ross felt his throat go dry. "What?" he whispered to the empty room. The final page demanded sole custody of Chloe, citing Ross's history of violence and volatile temperament. Numb, he sank onto the couch. It smelled like stale perfume and regret. The house echoed with emptiness. He couldn't even process how quickly everything unraveled, from a married father returning home one stormy night to a man now staring at an empty house. In the hush, he heard only the ticking clock on the wall, counting down the seconds of a life he no longer recognized. A knock at the door made him jump. He opened it to find his parents, Marshall and Beatrice Draven, standing on the porch. Beatrice's eyes were red from crying. "Son," Marshall said, stepping forward, "we came as soon as we heard from Travis." Beatrice entered, gasping at the disheveled state of the living room. "Oh my goodness, Ross, where's Chloe? Please tell me she's here." Ross swallowed thickly. "No, Miranda took her. There's a note." He handed it over, voice shaking. Beatrice's hands trembled as she read it. Marshall scanned the divorce papers, frustration burning behind his eyes. "Ross, you need to stay calm. We'll sort this out properly. If you do anything reckless now, it's just going to make you look worse in court." "Worse in court?" Ross echoed hollowly. "Dad, she's taken my daughter. She's drained our accounts too, hasn't she? I can't reach Chloe." He glanced around, realized the wedding photos were gone from the walls. It felt like Miranda had tried to erase every trace of him. Beatrice put a comforting hand on his shoulder. "We're here for you," she said softly. "But you must not go after Miranda in anger. She's already painted you as dangerous." Ross's fists clenched, fresh tears gathering in his eyes. What am I supposed to do, just let them vanish? Chloe's my kid, not some bargaining chip. Marshall exhaled slowly. We'll get legal help, do things by the book. For now, you might stay with us. This house is a crime scene in the police report, and I don't think you should be alone here. Ross's gaze swept around the living room, landing on the shattered picture frame where he and Chloe once smiled at Disneyland. The broken glass on the floor reminded him of how fragile his world had become. I don't know what to do, he admitted. Beatrice wrapped him in a hug. He stood there rigidly at first, then slumped into her embrace. We'll fight for Chloe, his mother murmured. Just please, Ross, keep your head. We can't lose you too. Outside, the clouds parted slightly, a weak ray of sunlight spilling onto the porch. But inside Ross Draven's mind, everything remained locked in darkness. All he knew was that Miranda had vanished with their daughter, and the system now viewed him as the villain. He had never felt more powerless. 3 weeks passed like a slow-moving nightmare. Ross faced mandatory court appearances and humiliating speculation from neighbors who whispered behind his back. The local paper even ran a brief column under the police blotter. Man arrested after domestic incident. Child possibly involved. Though Chloe wasn't directly mentioned by name, Ross felt the stigma clinging to him like a bad odor. He took a leave of absence from work. Every time he tried to concentrate on spreadsheets or project files, his mind returned to Chloe. Where was she? Was she safe? Miranda ignored every attempt he made to contact her. He suspected she'd changed her number. His own attorney, a middle-aged man named Phil Maxwell, warned him to stay patient and not violate the restraining order. Meanwhile, rumors swirled that Miranda was meeting with high-priced lawyers to finalize the divorce. Unable to stay in his empty house, Ross spent most days at his parents' modest suburban home. At night, he found himself wandering alone, the weight of helplessness crushing him. One evening, he ended up at a rundown bar called Porter's Edge. Fluorescent signs buzzed in the window, and inside the stale odor of cigarette smoke hung heavy. Ross slid onto a bar stool, ignoring the curious glances of a few patrons. He sipped whiskey, his reflection in the mirrored shelf behind the counter, almost unrecognizable sunken eyes, unkempt hair, shoulders slumped like he carried an invisible anchor. A couple of rowdy regulars started up a conversation 2 stools away, trading jokes about cuckolds and men who can't keep their wives satisfied. Ross tried to ignore them, but their voices seemed to pierce right through him. "Hey, buddy," slurred one man in a flannel shirt. "You that Draven guy, right? Heard your old lady ran off with another dude. Tough break." The man's grin was anything but sympathetic. Ross's knuckles whitened on his glass. "Not your business," he muttered. "Oh, come on," the flannel shirt man needled. "Heard she took your kid, too. That's rough, man. Real rough. You must feel, I don't know, like less of a man, yeah?" Hot shame flooded Ross's cheeks. The bartender, a wiry fellow with thinning hair, shot him a sympathetic glance but didn't intervene. Ross's heart pounded, a swirl of anger and humiliation. He saw the 2 men snickering. "Back off," Ross said quietly, swallowing the lump in his throat. "Or what?" the other man challenged. He stood, stepping closer. "You gonna do something about it, tough guy? Heard you're good at beating up folks in your own house, but how about here?" Ross's pulse thundered. He shoved away from the bar. "I'm not looking for trouble," he managed, voice trembling, but old resentments burned inside him, fueling a savage temptation. The man snorted. "Didn't think so." He shoved Ross lightly in the shoulder, a rude invitation to brawl. For a split second, Ross's fists curled. He imagined slamming this man's head onto the bar, unleashing all the pent-up wrath twisting inside him. But he also pictured a new set of handcuffs, another charge of assault, and even less chance of seeing Chloe again. He turned away sharply, forcing himself to walk toward the door. The men laughed behind him, calling him a coward, worthless, all sorts of names that made the blood pound in Ross's ears. Still, he pushed open the door into the chilly night air, breath ragged. Outside, the wind carried the distant roar of passing traffic. Ross looked up at the sky, half expecting to see storm clouds gathering once more. Instead, he saw a scattering of stars, silent and indifferent to his pain. Something inside him snapped, and angry resolution took shape. He'd tasted humiliation, lost almost everything, and was forced to swallow the narrative that he was the monster. Meanwhile, Miranda and Axel faced no consequences for their betrayal. This is wrong, he thought, bitterness lacing his every fiber. They can't just take my daughter, my life, and expect me to roll over. I have to fight back somehow. The parking lot was nearly empty, the overhead lamp casting a sickly glow on the cracked asphalt. Ross's footsteps echoed as he left the bar behind. His mind churned with the memory of seeing Axel in his bed, of Miranda's scornful eyes, and the helplessness of being led away in cuffs. He climbed into the old sedan he'd borrowed from Travis and gripped the steering wheel. "I'm not done," he whispered, a steely edge to his voice. "I don't care what the law says. I need my daughter back, and if it means making Axel pay, so be it." With that, Ross Draven started the engine. The night swallowed him, but not before a faint glimmer of streetlight revealed the ruthless determination etched on his face. Betrayal had carved open a part of him he never knew existed. And now, that darkness whispered one single word in his mind: revenge. Ross Draven had spent days planning his confrontation, though planning might have been too strong a word. It was more like an obsession that grew every time he pictured Axel Kincaid in his bedroom, wrapped up with Miranda. Despite the chaos in his life, an impending divorce, drained finances, and the heartbreaking absence of his daughter, Chloe Ross only felt one thing crystallizing in his mind: Axel must pay. Late one evening, he parked in the shadow of a broken street lamp behind Axel's gym. This part of the neighborhood was eerily quiet, the kind of place where the asphalt was cracked and the dumpsters overflowed. The stench of rotting garbage lingered in the air, and an anemic moon occasionally slipped out from behind the clouds. Ross had spent the previous night waiting in a borrowed sedan, stealthily observing Axel's routine. He discovered Axel liked to work out until nearly midnight, often leaving with an obvious swagger in his step. Seeing that arrogant stride had sent Ross's blood boiling. Now, the second night, Ross was prepared. He clutched a worn baseball bat on the passenger seat. A relic from his high school days, it had his initials RD carved into the handle. He stared at it, heart thumping. "I don't have to go that far," he reasoned. "Just scare him. Make him feel the pain I've felt." But deep down, Ross knew he was past the point of rational restraint. Around 12:15 a.m., the side door of the gym banged open. Ross hunched lower, peering through the windshield. Axel appeared, wearing a dark hoodie and carrying a sports bag. He paused for a moment to check his phone, streetlight illuminating his face just enough for Ross to see the smug curve of his mouth. That same mouth had probably whispered lies into Miranda's ear. Ross's chest felt tight. He slipped out of the car, bat in hand, moving close to the brick wall. One step at a time, his nerves jangled like live wires. When Axel reached his car, a sleek black coupe, he set down his bag to fish for the keys. Rain began to patter, a faint drizzle that mirrored Ross's racing pulse. Now. Ross lunged. The bat smashed against Axel's driver's side window, sending glass shards cascading onto the asphalt. The night exploded into chaos. Axel let out a startled yell, stumbling backward against a puddle. "What the?" Axel shouted, shock contorting his features. Ross didn't hesitate. He swung the bat again, this time hitting the rearview mirror, ripping it clean off the door. Axel tried to scramble away, but Ross caught him by the collar of his hoodie and hauled him back. "You think you can just destroy my life and walk away?" Ross snarled, voice unrecognizable. "Where's Chloe? Where's my daughter?" Axel's eyes were wide with alarm. He raised his hands defensively. "I don't know, man. Miranda took her. She's done with me, too," he sputtered. "Stop, please. You're out of—" Ross brought the bat down hard across Axel's side. Axel screamed, doubling over. Something inside Ross snapped, the heartbreak fueling his fury. He wanted to hear Axel beg. He wanted him to know exactly how betrayal tasted. Blood pounded in Ross's ears, drowning out every thought except the desire for revenge. He struck Axel's shin, and Axel collapsed onto the wet ground, letting out an anguished groan. Ross drew a ragged breath. He could sense a sickening adrenaline rush, a darkness whispering, "More. Make him really pay." He raised the bat again. The third swing landed on Axel's arm, cracking bone. Axel howled, the sound echoing off the alley walls. Ross felt a sudden wave of revulsion at himself. Tears stung his eyes. Still, the image of Miranda in bed with this man seared through his mind. "Ross!" Axel gasped, voice quivering. "You're insane. I didn't force Miranda." A searing wave of hatred clashed with guilt in Ross's chest. He swung once more, aiming at Axel's thigh. Axel's phone, slick with water, slipped from his grip and clattered across the pavement. Ross froze, chest heaving, noticing the battered figure whimpering at his feet. In the faint glow of a distant streetlight, Ross saw the damage he'd wrought. Axel's twisted leg, blood on the pavement, shattered glass everywhere. He realized he'd crossed a line he could never uncross. He whipped around at the sound of a window sliding open above them. A concerned resident, face shadowed by the building's overhang, yelled, "I've called the police! They're on their way!" For a heartbeat, Ross stood there, panting. The bat clutched so tightly his knuckles went white. Then survival instincts kicked in. He bolted, footsteps splashing through puddles. He turned a corner, gripping the bat, adrenaline on overdrive. Somewhere behind him, Axel's groans trailed into the background of sirens that soon wailed closer. Ross rounded another alley, tossed the bat into a dumpster, and kept running, the drizzle turning into a heavier rain. He shed his hoodie, burying it under a pile of garbage to hide any evidence. All the while, a voice in his head repeated, "What have you done? What have you done?" Eventually, he reached his car, lungs burning from the sprint. As he climbed inside, Ross caught a glimpse of himself in the rearview mirror, soaked hair plastered to his forehead, eyes wild with a strange mixture of triumph and horror. His hands shook violently on the steering wheel. Switching on the ignition, he peeled out of the alley, trying to outrun the sirens echoing in the night. But no matter how far he drove, the sound of Axel's screams stayed with him like a broken record, reminding him that he had just become something monstrous. Ross spent the next few days in a panicked haze, constantly glancing over his shoulder. He avoided phone calls, refused to answer the door, and didn't dare drive his own car. He holed up in a cheap motel on the outskirts of town, the flickering neon sign out front reflecting his own anxious pulse. He stayed glued to the local news on a battered TV set, every police bulletin making him break into a sweat. Though the headlines didn't name him specifically, the story was unmistakable. Man brutally attacked, leaving late-night gym suspect unknown. On the third morning, Ross got a call from an unknown number. He hesitated, then picked up. Silence, a faint crackle, then a low voice. "Ross? It's me, Travis." Ross rubbed his temples, exhaling. Travis was a co-worker, possibly the only person who still had a shred of faith in him. "How'd you get this number?" "Doesn't matter," Travis replied sharply. "Dude, cops have been swarming your neighborhood looking for you. Axel Kincaid identified you from a photo. They've got a warrant out for your arrest." Ross sank onto the edge of the motel bed. The thin comforter smelled of bleach and desperation. "I had to do it," he mumbled, chest constricting. "He took everything from me." "Listen to yourself," Travis hissed. "People say you broke nearly every bone in his leg. He's in the hospital, Ross. This is bad, like felony assault bad." Ross closed his eyes, the memory of Axel's screams making him nauseous. "I'm not turning myself in," he whispered. "What if they never let me see Chloe again? Miranda's told them I'm violent. This just proves her right." Travis paused. "Hiding won't fix it. You need a lawyer. Don't make it worse. They'll hunt you down eventually." Ross wanted to argue, but deep down, he knew Travis was right. His stomach felt like it was tangled in knots. "Fine," he relented. "I'll figure something out." A day later, Ross stepped onto the sidewalk outside an old strip mall. He was supposed to meet a criminal defense attorney recommended by Travis. But as soon as Ross approached the main entrance, red and blue lights flashed in the parking lot. They found me, he realized. A swarm of police cars screeched to a halt. Officers jumped out, guns drawn. Panic seized Ross. He considered running but realized it would be pointless. He raised his hands, heart pounding like a war drum. A tall, stern-looking detective walked up. "Ross Draven?" The detective's badge read Hatcher. Ross nodded stiffly, blood roaring in his ears. "You're under arrest for aggravated assault." Hatcher's voice was clipped, professional. He nodded at the other officers, who swiftly pinned Ross against the hood of a cruiser and cuffed him. "Anything you say can be used against you in a court of law." Ross didn't fight. He felt a dull acceptance wash over him, like the moment right before jumping off a cliff. His mind swirled with regret. "I've sealed my fate. This is exactly what Miranda wanted." Within hours, he was booked, fingerprinted, and placed into a holding cell. His eyes burned with exhaustion, but he couldn't sleep on the cold steel bench. The overhead lights buzzed like a constant accusation, the jail's cinder-block walls thick with the scent of sweat and disinfectant. At his bail hearing, the judge reviewed the evidence. Axel's extensive injuries, witness statements, and footage from a nearby security camera that showed Ross's car fleeing the scene. Miranda's lawyer, a sharp-faced woman in a crisp suit, arrived to support the victim, offering statements about Ross's violent tendencies. Ross fought the urge to yell that he'd been provoked, that Axel had destroyed his family. But all he had was a public defender who kept reminding him to stay calm, to avoid saying anything that might worsen his case. After a short deliberation, the judge pronounced Ross Draven guilty of assault with a deadly weapon resulting in serious bodily harm. Considering his prior arrest record with domestic violence allegations, Ross was sentenced to 5 years in a medium-security prison. The words echoed in Ross's head like a final verdict on everything he'd once hoped for. Miranda, in the back of the courtroom, stood with arms folded. She hardly looked at him. A flicker of something, maybe satisfaction, crossed her face before she turned away. Ross felt a flash of raw pain, then numbness set in. As 2 guards led him away in cuffs, Ross took one last look at the wooden benches, the drab courtroom walls, and the place where his life had unraveled so thoroughly. "I did this to myself," he thought grimly, "and now I have to pay." The steel gate slammed shut behind Ross Draven as he stepped into the general population wing of Blackwood Penitentiary, a medium-security prison with a reputation for harboring tough gangs and violent feuds. The corridor's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glare on the chipped concrete floors. "Move along," grunted a guard, nudging Ross forward. Ross clutched a rolled-up blanket and a small bundle of prison-issued clothes, his entire world now distilled into a few coarse fabrics. Inmates crowded the walkway, some lounging in corners, others glaring at newcomers with predatory eyes. As Ross passed, he heard hisses of fresh meat. His heartbeat thundered in his chest. He'd never felt more vulnerable. They showed him to a cramped cell, the walls bearing graffiti from past occupants. A narrow bunk, a dented metal sink, and a toilet affixed to the back wall completed the bleak furnishing. Ross swallowed hard, stepping inside. The bars clanged shut behind him. Hours bled into a mind-numbing routine head counts, cafeteria lines, an hour of outdoor time in a fenced yard. But tension simmered everywhere like a pot on the verge of boiling. Gangs banded together by race or territory. Contraband cigarettes changed hands faster than the guards could track. It was a dog-eat-dog world, and Ross was painfully aware he was unprepared. Within a few days, Ross made the mistake of refusing to hand over his breakfast apple to a towering inmate with sunken cheeks. The man calling himself Brick threatened to pummel Ross. A fight nearly broke out before the guards intervened. The rumor traveled fast. Ross Draven wouldn't just roll over. That kind of reputation could be a double-edged sword. One afternoon, during the recreation period in the bleak yard, Ross was approached by 2 men with shaved heads and prison tattoos. They looked him up and down like a pair of wolves. One, sporting a spider web inked on his neck, grinned ferally. "So you're the new tough guy who put some dude in the hospital, huh?" Ross tried to keep his voice steady. "Not looking for trouble." He gazed at the barbed wire overhead, remembering a time he could walk free under an open sky. Now it felt like he was trapped in a cage of regrets. The second man chuckled. "Too late for that." He jerked a thumb over his shoulder. "Rocco Iron Rock Young wants to see you." Ross had heard the name whispered in the cafeteria lines, Iron Rock, the self-styled boss of a redneck faction within these walls. Rumor was, he'd been inside for more than a decade on multiple counts of assault, and he'd turned his brutality into currency. Fear clutched Ross's stomach. They led Ross to a corner of the yard where a tall, broad-shouldered man with a thick beard lounged against the chain-link fence. Rocco had an air of lazy confidence, as if the entire prison was his personal playground. "So," Rocco drawled, flicking a cigarette to the ground, "you're the one they say messed up that guy's bones on the outside. Gotta admit, I respect the intensity." Ross clenched his jaw. "What do you want?" Rocco's eyes narrowed. "I got eyes everywhere. You're alone, no crew, no backup." "That's not good in here." His lips curled into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You and I can have an understanding, or you can end up in the infirmary real quick." Ross felt cold sweat trickle down his back. "I don't do gangs." Rocco shrugged, scratching at the peeling barbed wire tattoo on his forearm. "Gangs? This is just business. I can give you protection, or I can decide you're a problem. It's simple, really." Before Ross could reply, one of Rocco's men stepped forward, locking eyes with him. "Fail to follow the rules. You get hurt, or worse." A hush fell with only the distant shuffle of inmates playing basketball behind them. Ross realized with dawning horror that the rumors about forced arrangements were true. Rocco had taken advantage of countless inmates using violence, intimidation, or the promise of safety. Ross felt revulsion coil in his stomach, imagining what Rocco might demand in return. I can't get caught in this, but he also knew refusing outright could be deadly. "I'll think about it," Ross muttered, feeling trapped. A guard's whistle signaled the end of rec time. Ross seized the moment to turn away, but Rocco's voice followed him like a hiss. "You do that, Draven, but don't think too long. I don't wait forever." As Ross trudged back to his cell, he couldn't shake off the sense that he'd stepped into a darker circle of hell. The walls felt like they were closing in, and Miranda's accusations echoed in his head. Violent, dangerous. Maybe she wasn't entirely wrong. He'd become a person he scarcely recognized, and now he had to survive in a place built for broken souls. "God help me," Ross thought, lying on the thin mattress that night, wide awake, "because I'm not sure I can help myself." The reality of incarceration set in like a relentless tide. Days blurred into weeks for Ross Draven. He learned to navigate the tension in the cafeteria, where one careless glance could spark a brawl. He forced himself to lift weights in the prison yard, hoping a stronger physique might deter potential attackers, but no amount of muscle could shield him from the bitter taste of regret. Nights were worst. Lying in his cramped cell, he replayed memories of Chloe, how she used to run into his arms after school, blonde pigtails bouncing, how her laughter once filled the house. Now, everything was silent, except for the occasional scream echoing down the corridors. Sleep never came easy. One afternoon, a guard named Wilson stopped by Ross's cell and shoved a small envelope through the bars. "Mail call?" he grunted. Ross's heart jumped. He hadn't received any letters since the day they locked him up. Eagerly, he ripped it open. The return address read Beatrice Draven, his mother. He sat on the edge of his bunk, scanning her careful handwriting. "Ross, we've tried to find Miranda and Chloe, but we're hitting dead ends. Miranda closed her bank account and her old phone number no longer works. We have no clue where she's taken Chloe. Every letter we send is returned to us marked no such address. Your father's furious. He wants to hire a private investigator, but we can't afford much. Please stay strong. We love you and will visit soon." Mom Ross's hands trembled as he finished reading. Anger, guilt, and heartbreak twisted inside him like a knife. She's really gone off the grid with Chloe. Fear settled deep in his gut. What if he never saw his daughter again? "It's all my fault," he thought. I handed Miranda the perfect weapon by assaulting Axel. He pressed the paper to his forehead, fighting the urge to cry. The clang of the cell door jarred him from his thoughts. 2 other inmates shuffled inside, escorted by guards' new cellmates, apparently. The guard barked instructions, and soon Ross found himself awkwardly standing while these strangers eyed his bunk, sizing him up. Later, in the dim corridor outside, Ross's father, Marshal Draven, appeared for a scheduled visit. Through a glass partition, they spoke on scratchy phones. Marshal looked older, more haggard than Ross remembered. Creases etched his face with worry. "Son," Marshall began, voice subdued, "your mother already told you. We can't find Chloe. I'm so sorry." Ross swallowed the lump in his throat. "Dad, I'm trapped in here. I can't do anything from inside these walls. You have to keep looking. There has to be a record somewhere. Maybe check her relatives in other states, or look at Chloe's old school records. We're trying, Marshall said quietly. Your mother's been calling everyone we know, hoping for a clue. But Miranda's mother, Stephanie, isn't cooperating either. Ross let out a bitter laugh. Figures. Stephanie Turner had never truly approved of Ross, and now she had every reason to side with Miranda. Tell Mom not to give up, okay? Marshall nodded, tears shining in his eyes. Ross, you need to focus on surviving in here. Don't do anything else that'll extend your sentence. We'll keep you updated. Ross noticed Marshall's gaze flicker to a bruise under Ross's jaw, an unpleasant souvenir from a brief scuffle in the yard. Ross shifted uncomfortably, aware that his father suspected the violence that plagued prison life. I'll be careful, he promised, voice tight. After the guard ended their visit, Ross returned to his cell, the weight of his father's concern pressing on him. The hopelessness of being locked away while Miranda disappeared with Chloe was suffocating. That evening, Ross found a moment's solitude in the prison chapel, a small, musty room with mismatched chairs and a faded cross on the wall. He wasn't particularly religious, but the quiet space offered refuge from the cacophony. He sank into a chair, staring at the flickering fluorescent light. A tall, middle-aged chaplain approached, politely introducing himself as Chaplain Barnes. You seem troubled, Barnes said gently. Anything you want to share? Ross hesitated. He could sense the man's genuine compassion. I messed up, he admitted, voice thick with emotions he'd tried to bury. I lost my daughter my whole life, and every day in this place, I feel less human. Barnes placed a hand on Ross's shoulder. Sometimes we do things that push us to our darkest selves, but that doesn't mean we can't find a path back. You can still hold on to hope for your daughter. Ross drew a shaky breath. He thought of Chloe's wide, trusting eyes. I don't even know where she is, he whispered. I've got no control over anything anymore. Barnes nodded. That's the hardest part, surrendering what we can't fix ourselves. But it's not over, Ross. It's never truly over unless you give up. Words easier said than lived. Still, Ross grasped that small sliver of hope. He left the chapel with a heavy heart, but a faint determination flickered inside him. He would endure. He'd find a way to atone, survive this place, and maybe just maybe see Chloe again. Outside, the corridors buzzed with tension, inmates shifting toward dinner lines. But for a fleeting moment, Ross felt a spark of resolve. It wouldn't heal his regrets or bring Chloe back instantly, but it was enough to keep him going enough to face another day in the concrete maze of Blackwood Penitentiary. Ross Draven had stopped marking the days on his cell wall. Once he passed the 1-year mark in Blackwood Penitentiary, counting them felt pointless. Instead, he filled his time with a punishing daily workout routine. Every morning, he'd drop from his bunk, hit the concrete floor, and push himself through 100 push-ups. At midday, he'd run laps in the yard until sweat soaked his uniform. At night, he'd do pull-ups on the iron bars by his bed. The prison rumor mill whispered that Ross's newfound bulk was a vain attempt to scare off the predators who lurked in every corridor. In truth, Ross lifted weights and trained more to distract from the constant ache in his chest. Anything to avoid thinking about Miranda or Chloe. He didn't even know where they were. Letters from his parents offered little hope, and Miranda certainly wasn't writing him. One scalding summer afternoon, Ross headed out to the exercise yard. His muscles rippled under his thin t-shirt, and he was no longer the skinny newbie the gangs could push around. Yet the climate of violence never eased up. Fights broke out in the cafeteria over something as trivial as an extra bread roll. Shakedowns in cells turned up makeshift knives and hidden contraband. Ross tried to keep his head down, but a place like Blackwood demanded alliances or submission. He found a spot by the rusted pull-up bars, ignoring the curious glances of a few inmates perched nearby. Just as he wrapped his hands around the metal, he heard a hiss of laughter from behind. He spun around, tensing. A wiry man with a crooked smile goes by Ray Stryker, leaned against the fence. Hey, Draven, that's some serious bulk you got now, Stryker said. Iron Rock still sniffing around, or did you work out some deal? Ross squared his shoulders. I don't make deals, he replied, voice low. Stryker shrugged. Better watch your back, man. Refusing him too many times isn't healthy around here. Ross said nothing. He resumed his pull-ups, each rep an outlet for the rage coiled in his chest. Behind him, Stryker's laughter eventually faded into the yard's dull roar. But the warning lingered. Iron Rock Rocco Young hadn't been pressing Ross daily, but his gang kept eyes on him. Ross's self-imposed isolation made him both a threat and a target. A week later, in the dank darkness of the showers, Ross discovered just how fragile his safety net was. It was late, almost lights out, and the guard on duty was more interested in finishing a coffee than in ensuring inmates were secure. Ross rinsed soap from his hair, mind half on his nightly routine when the shadow fell across his back. He turned to see a hulking figure, shaved head gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Another joined from the left, cornering him. Ross recognized them as two of Iron Rock's lackeys. Their smirks confirmed their intention long before one grabbed at Ross's arm. "Time to pay the toll," the bigger one sneered. Ross's instincts flared. He yanked his arm free, but the second man lunged, slamming Ross against the tile wall. Pain shot through his shoulder, water still pelting him from overhead. A vile grin curved on the attacker's face. "Rocco warned you," he muttered. "You want no arrangement? Then he takes what he wants and you can't do—" Before the man could finish, Ross shoved with all his might, catching him off balance. The man staggered back, cursing. The second tried to grab Ross's neck, but Ross twisted sideways, landing a punch to the ribs. "I will not be broken," he roared inwardly. The echoes of 100 push-ups, 1,000 pull-ups, fueled every strike. Water splashed, fists collided with flesh, the cramped tiles streaked red from a split lip Ross couldn't tell whose. Blood pounded in his ears. He swung at the taller man's jaw, felt the impact jar up his arm. A savage growl escaped him, the same anger that once fueled his assault on Axel. For a moment, he didn't care about consequences, he only cared about survival. His victory was fleeting. A baton rapped sharply against the wall. "Break it up!" The guard had finally noticed. Another guard barreled in, pepper spray at the ready. The stinging chemicals filled the wet air, burning Ross's eyes and throat. He doubled over, choking. When the chaos cleared, all three men were cuffed and hauled to solitary. Ross spent 2 days in a claustrophobic cell with a single slot for light. His knuckles ached, his bruised ribs throbbed. Worst of all, the warden slapped him with a disciplinary ticket for assaulting fellow inmates, which effectively shattered his chance at early parole. Days later, Ross trudged into the hearing in shackles. The parole board stared at his recent file. A major fight inflicted injuries on 2 inmates. The lead interviewer gave Ross a hard look. "Mr. Draven, do you have anything to say in your defense?" Ross clenched his fists in his lap. "They jumped me," he said quietly. "I was just—" "Every inmate says that," one board member cut him off. "You have a history of violence. Not just in here, but outside. We can't grant parole to someone who can't stay out of trouble." Blood rushed to Ross's ears. He thought of how Miranda's accusations still stuck to him like tar. He thought of how the system saw him as nothing more than a brute. Something inside him snapped. "I tried to avoid it," his voice rose. "But this place, it's a circus. You don't give a damn if we get hurt or assaulted. And you think I'm the problem?" A guard's hand clamped down on his shoulder, urging him to shut up. One of the board members frowned as Ross's outburst escalated. They conferred in muted tones for a few minutes, then gave the verdict, parole denied. Back in his cell, Ross felt the walls closing in once more. He realized he'd lost his final chance to walk free early. "I only have myself to blame," he thought, bitterness scorching his heart. "This system is twisted," he murmured to the flickering overhead light. "They want me to be a monster, so maybe I'll survive by being one." And so, the seeds of resentment took deeper root, fertilized by lost hope and the memory of a child's face he might not see for years to come. Some months later, Ross found himself forging an uneasy alliance with a younger inmate named Kenny Johansson, slight in build, naive eyes, locked up on a minor drug offense. Kenny was assigned to clean duty alongside Ross, scrubbing floors and polishing the metal tables in the prison's common area. Despite the grim environment, the kid exuded a sort of hopeful energy that Ross found oddly comforting. "You think we'll ever get out of here in one piece?" Kenny asked one day, wiping sweat from his brow. The overhead fans were broken, leaving the room stuffy and stale. Ross shrugged, tossing a mop bucket aside. I'm not counting on it, but you should. Your sentence is short, right? Kenny nodded. Less than 2 years if I keep my head down. You got more time? Ross forced a small smile. I'm in for 5. Already served more than half, though. He didn't mention how his parole hopes were dashed, or how each day felt longer than a year in the outside world. Over time, he and Kenny formed a cautious friendship, exchanging rations in the cafeteria, watching each other's back in the yard. Ross saw in Kenny a reflection of the man he used to be, someone who believed in second chances. It was a reminder that not everyone in Blackwood had fully surrendered to the darkness, but that fragile hope was shattered when Iron Rock set his sights on Kenny. One afternoon, Ross spotted Rocco's crew cornering the kid near the laundry bins. Ross was too far away to intervene, and the guards were nowhere in sight. Fear twisted in his stomach. A few hours later, he found Kenny bruised and trembling in the utility closet, refusing to speak of what happened. The next morning, Kenny turned up with fresh bruises on his face. Ross seethed inside. Why didn't you report this? He demanded. We can get you protective custody. Kenny just shook his head. If I snitch, they'll do worse next time, he whispered, voice cracking. I don't know how to stop them. Ross's mind spun. He remembered the humiliations he'd endured, the forced fight, the threat of assault in the showers. He's just a kid. He doesn't deserve this. 2 nights later, the entire prison awoke to frantic shouts. The overhead alarms blared. Ross sprang from his bunk, heart hammering. Guards stampeded down the corridors, dragging battered inmates to the medical wing. Whispers spread. Somebody got killed. At first, it was just a rumor, but then Ross overheard one guard mutter, Poor kid, looks like he never stood a chance. And the hair on Ross's neck stood up. Kenny. He waited, straining to see beyond the bars as paramedics rushed a stretcher through the block. Something in him hollowed out. The next day, the official story leaked. Kenny Johansson was found in a storage area, badly beaten. They flew him to the hospital, but it was too late. He died from internal bleeding. Ross sat on his bunk, hands shaking. He'd known prison was brutal, yet witnessing a kid's life snuffed out so senselessly ignited a white-hot anger. He remembered the sight of Rocco Young in the yard, smirking like he owned the place. The guards' indifference was a sick joke. They cared more about controlling the prison population than saving anyone from real harm. During lunch, Ross confronted a sullen guard in the hallway. Why didn't you protect him? You guys had to see the signs. The guard shrugged, gaze averted. We can't be everywhere at once, Draven. Step aside. Ross's fists clenched. So they're going to let Iron Rock get away with murder. The bitterness coiled deeper inside him. Watching Kenny's empty bunk across the hall fueled a single, desperate thought. I have to end this. I can't let Rocco keep doing this to people. He lay awake that night, staring at the cracked ceiling. His mind whirled with rage and guilt. If I'd forced Kenny to ask for protective custody, if I'd confronted Rocco. But second-guessing didn't bring the kid back. Only one path remained. Iron Rock had to be taken out. Ross swallowed, heart thudding. But how? Rocco was top dog. His crew was large. The guards looked the other way. Then Ross recalled something he'd heard in passing, a whisper that an external gang might handle hits for the right price. Ross's parents had no extra money, but Ross himself had squirreled away some cash in a personal account from before the trial. It might be enough. I'll do it for Kenny. The vow etched itself into his soul. The thought of stooping to murder unsettled him. But the memory of the kid's bruised face and final fate steeled Ross's resolve. This place wants me to be a monster? Fine. I'll be the monster that brings another monster down. Blackwood's visiting room was a dull, institutional green, with rows of plastic chairs and glass partitions. The guards supervised each visit with hawk-like vigilance, but Ross knew there were ways to pass messages if you greased the right palms. Over the past few weeks, he'd quietly asked around for contacts, taking care not to arouse suspicion. Finally, a name emerged: Marcus "Smoke" Turner, a mid-level gang member known to do favors for a price. He had never visited Ross before, so they arranged for a man from the outside, someone Ross had known loosely in his old neighborhood, to set up the meeting. One rainy afternoon, Smoke strolled into the visiting area, wearing a cheap ball cap pulled low over his forehead. Ross's stomach churned. Am I really doing this? He forced himself to stay calm. They spoke through the phone on either side of the partition. Smoke gave a casual grin. Long time. No see, Draven. Heard you need some special services. Ross cleared his throat. I do. Inside. A man named Rocco Young. They call him Iron Rock. He paused, scanning the room to ensure no guard was too close. He needs to disappear. Smoke's eyes flickered with mild surprise. Brave request. This Rocco's got a crew? Ross nodded. A big one. But I want him gone, or at least put in the ground for a long time. I have some cash stashed, enough for a down payment. The rest, well, I'll figure it out. He tried not to sound desperate, but his voice trembled with an undercurrent of fear and determination. Smoke studied him for a moment. Then he lowered his voice. I can't pull triggers inside, but I can have the wheels set in motion. If my people start a riot, for instance, we can have a knife slip into the right hands. Iron Rock won't leave that yard alive. Ross's stomach tightened at how casually Smoke discussed it. All that matters is he doesn't hurt anyone else or me. Smoke smirked. Fine. We do this. You pay the total. No refunds, no regrets. You get me? Ross forced a nod. Deal. They discussed the specifics in coded language. Guards occasionally glanced over but saw only two men in hushed conversation. By the time they finished, Ross's hands were clammy. He would contact Smoke's associate on the outside, funnel the money from his old account. Smoke promised the issue would be resolved soon. 2 days later, during an evening lockdown, Ross felt the tremors of the impending storm. A fight broke out near D Block. Alarms blared and the entire prison locked down. Guards swarmed the corridors, but the chaos only grew as certain inmates attacked each other simultaneously. It was orchestrated, a flash riot. Ross stayed low in his cell, adrenaline surging. This is it. The next morning, the official count revealed multiple stabbings, 3 fatalities, including Rocco Iron Rock Young. Word spread that he'd been ambushed in the yard by a group of masked inmates, shanked repeatedly before the guards could intervene. Some whispered it was a targeted hit from an outside gang. Others claimed it was retribution for Kenny's death. The truth was lost in the swirl of rumors. Ross heard the news from a passing guard. Iron Rock's gone, the guard grunted, shaking his head. Ross felt a strange jolt of relief entwined with horror. The knowledge that he'd orchestrated a murder to survive this place made his soul shiver. Have I become as bad as him? When the warden announced a week-long lockdown, Ross lay on his bunk, images racing through his mind. Kenny's hopeful grin, Rocco's snarling face, and a deal struck through plexiglass. He had orchestrated violence with a phone call, sending a message into the outside world. No going back. The riots cost several inmates their lives, but the guards never pinned the blame on Ross. He kept his head down, feigning ignorance. The prison eventually returned to its uneasy routine, minus one predator. Some inmates eyed Ross with newfound respect or wariness, though no one publicly accused him. If the system was twisted enough to let Rocco reign for so long, Ross justified, then he had no choice but to fight it with the same brutality. At night, however, guilt weighed heavy on him. He'd avenged Kenny, perhaps saved future victims, but at the cost of his own conscience. One step deeper into darkness. He wondered if Chloe would ever forgive him, or if she'd even recognize the man he'd become. 5 years. That was Ross Draven's sentence. He served nearly every day. The prison's final checkpoint was a wire mesh gate that rattled open at dawn, spitting him onto the outside sidewalk in ill-fitting civilian clothes. He clutched a small plastic bag with everything he owned in ID, some spare cash, and a worn photo of Chloe from before the fiasco. The sky was overcast, a somber gray matching Ross's mood. He breathed the free air, though it tasted stale with car exhaust. No one was waiting for him. His parents had wanted to come, but he'd told them not to. He felt too ashamed to greet them right away. He took a bus across town, ignoring the sideways glances from passengers who probably sensed the fresh-out-of-prison vibe. The city looked different: new shops, old buildings renovated. Ross felt disoriented, like a time traveler. The entire ride, His thoughts circled around one question: how do I find Chloe? Eventually, he rented a cramped studio in a rundown neighborhood. The paint peeled off the walls and the faucet leaked incessantly. But it was cheap, no questions asked. Ross started a night shift in a warehouse, hauling pallets and stacking boxes for minimum wage. Every bruise on his body reminded him of the years lost. Every bead of sweat hammered home how far from normal he'd fallen. Despite the menial job, Ross barely scraped by. His old bank account was nearly empty. The hit on Iron Rock had swallowed much of it. Groceries were costly, rent was due monthly, and he had precious little left to hire a proper investigator to find Chloe. Desperation gnawed at him. That's when he recalled the talk among some ex-cons about online hustles. Late one night, Ross sat at the thrift store computer he'd purchased. The glow of the monitor lit the dingy corners of his studio. He typed hungrily, scouring chat rooms, reading about email scams and fake charity sites. It felt wrong, sure, another dip into moral compromise. But he told himself it was temporary. I just need enough money to track down my daughter. He devised a plan: pose as a charity founder, spin a sob story about rescuing abandoned animals, and rake in donations from unsuspecting folks. Ross cringed at the deception, but after everything he'd done behind bars, tricking strangers online seemed almost tame. He created a website with stolen stock photos of sad-eyed puppies. A single PayPal link at the bottom invited contributions to help us save these innocent souls. Ross launched it and waited. Days ticked by, and then the first donation pinged in. $10 here, $20 there. He sold the credit card info to an offshore buyer for quick cash. It wasn't huge money, but it added up. Within a month, Ross had squirreled away enough to at least consider hiring a low-level PI again. Yet each new deposit into his hidden account reminded him he was drifting further from the man he once tried to be, a father who taught Chloe honesty and kindness. Now he was stealing from dog-ooders because he believed the end justified the means. Guilt gnawed at him nightly, but he pushed it down, focusing on one goal: find my daughter. He stared at Chloe's old photo taped to his mirror, her gap-toothed smile at age 5. She'd be 10 or 11 by now. God, she must be so grown up. The longing in Ross's chest was unbearable, but it also kept him going. If I have to become a criminal again, so be it. I won't lose Chloe forever. Occasionally, he'd call his parents from a payphone, give them updates. They worried about his well-being, offered to let him move back in. He refused too much pride, too much shame. Instead, he assured them he'd keep searching for Chloe. On his nights off, Ross forced himself to dream of a better future. He'd find Miranda's trail, rescue Chloe from her mother's manipulative grasp, and maybe, just maybe, redeem himself. The years in prison had left him hollow, but that hollow space was now filled with fierce resolve. The city lights outside his tiny window flickered like distant beacons of hope. I can do this, he told himself, even as his reflection showed a man with a haunted gaze. I survived Blackwood. I can survive anything. And with that, Ross Draven braced himself for the road ahead. Despite the moral compromises, the secrets he harbored, and the nightmares of prison violence that still prowled his mind, he couldn't give up. A father's love twisted, though it might seem in the wake of everything was the last piece of humanity he clung to. He'd use it like a compass, leading him straight into the next chapter of his life. Ross Draven pulled into a small parking lot adjacent to a strip of aging office buildings in suburban Dallas. The late afternoon sun reflected off the dull exterior windows, giving everything a hazy, golden tint. He stepped out of his dusty sedan, checking the address scrawled on a crumpled piece of paper. Kennedy Investigations, Suite 206. He'd scraped together just enough cash from his online charity scam to hire a private investigator, hoping for the faintest lead on Miranda and Chloe. For months, he'd turned up empty-handed. No matter how many public records or out-of-state contacts he tried, his daughter remained a ghost. Until now. Bracing himself, Ross headed inside. The hallway reeked of stale coffee and old carpet. A battered sign pointed him to Suite 206, where a glass door bore the name Kennedy Investigations in peeling letters. Detective Chase Kennedy was a lean man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and sharp, inquisitive eyes. He motioned Ross into a cramped office lined with battered filing cabinets. "Mr. Draven," he said, consulting a notepad. "We spoke on the phone." Ross nodded. "Thanks for seeing me. Any updates?" Kennedy tapped the notepad. "Miranda Turner, formerly Miranda Draven. She's hopped addresses multiple times. But I discovered she spent a few months living with a man named Axel Kincaid right here in Dallas." Ross tried to keep his composure. "So she really was with Axel, just like I suspected." He took a slow breath. "Any sign of my daughter, Chloe?" Kennedy looked apologetic. "No trace. I reached out to neighbors of that address. They recall seeing a woman and a young girl, but it seems the mother was gone more often than not, and the kid hardly ever played outside." He paused. "Anyway, I did find a recent record. Miranda's car was sold 2 months ago. Then she vanished." Ross's heart sank. Another dead end, only a faint thread. "What about this Axel Kincaid? Maybe he knows where she went." Kennedy handed Ross a business card. "That's the rehab center. Word is he was badly injured, broken ribs, broken leg, and spent months doing physical therapy. Now he's in a cheap apartment on the city's outskirts." Ross's jaw clenched, memories of that violent night ripping through him. "Axel is the reason I ended up in prison." But he reminded himself that hatred wouldn't bring Chloe back. He needed answers. He thanked Kennedy, handed over the final payment and crumpled bills, and headed out. Later that day, Ross drove to a rundown neighborhood dotted with bland one-story apartments. The sky had dimmed, the sun edging close to the horizon. A broken street lamp flickered overhead as he approached Axel Kincaid's address. Ross knocked on a weathered door labeled Apartment 1D. Muffled footsteps approached. A chain rattled. The door opened a crack and Axel's face appeared pale, thinner than Ross remembered, a faint scar edging his cheek. Shock flashed in Axel's eyes. "What the? Ross Draven?" He tried to slam the door, but Ross shoved his foot in. "I'm not here to finish what I started," Ross said firmly, though his heart pounded. "I need information." Axel eyed him warily. "You broke my bones, man. Put me in the hospital for months." Ross exhaled, swallowing guilt and anger. "Yeah, and I did 5 years for it, so let's call it even. Just let me in for 5 minutes or I'll talk right here in the hallway." Reluctantly, Axel unlatched the chain and let Ross step into a cramped living room that smelled faintly of disinfectant. A single worn couch faced a small TV, and a metal cane leaned against the wall. They stood in uneasy silence before Axel hobbled to the couch, grimacing with each step. He gestured for Ross to sit on a rickety chair. "What do you want?" he asked, voice taut. Ross hesitated, memories swirling. The affair, the betrayal, the fury that landed him behind bars. "Miranda," he said at last. "She took Chloe and vanished. I hear she was living with you." Axel barked a bitter laugh. "Oh, that. Didn't last long." He ran a hand through his short hair. "Miranda played me. I thought we'd start fresh once you were locked up. But she's a leech, grabbed my money, ran up debts. Then she met some other guy and walked out." Ross's eyes narrowed. "What other guy?" Axel shrugged, picking at a frayed thread on the couch cushion. "Never met him, but his name's Garrett McNeil. Heard he's from El Paso. She moved there a few months ago, left me a note that said basically I wasn't worth her time." Axel's voice wobbled between anger and hurt. Ross clenched his fists. Garrett McNeil, a new name, a new location. "And Chloe?" Axel shook his head. "She took the kid with her. I tried telling Miranda it wasn't right, cutting you off like that. But she wouldn't listen. She told me to butt out, said Chloe wasn't my problem. That's all I know." A moment passed in which both men avoided each other's gaze, former enemies, united by Miranda's callousness. Finally, Axel gestured toward his cane. "I'm done with that woman, man. She ruined my life, too. If you find her, I don't care what you do. Just leave me out of it." Ross exhaled. The tension in his chest loosened slightly. "Thanks for the lead," he managed. Rising, he walked to the door. Before leaving, he paused. "Look, I'm sorry for what I did. We can't change it, but I never meant it to go this far." Axel grimaced, prodding the cane with his foot. "Yeah, well, sorry won't fix my leg. But you did your time." His eyes flickered with a trace of pity. "Hope you find your kid." Ross gave a brief nod and stepped outside, the Texas heat greeting him like a stifling blanket. His heart pounded with a strange mix of relief and dread. At least I have a name now, Garrett McNeil, and a city, El Paso. As he climbed back into his sedan, Ross couldn't help but feel a surge of renewed determination. Chloe was out there, an innocent piece in Miranda's twisted game. He would cross the state if he had to, no matter the cost. Ross's next logical step was Miranda's mother, Stephanie Turner. Although Stephanie had never exactly welcomed him into the family, Ross suspected she might know more than she let on. If the detective's hints were correct, Miranda had kept sporadic contact with her mother. It was a Sunday morning when Ross arrived in a quiet neighborhood lined with manicured lawns and tidy ranch-style homes. The sky was bright, a faint breeze rustling the leaves of an old oak that shaded Stephanie's white brick house. Ross parked a block away, recalling that Stephanie attended the same church service every Sunday at 9 a.m. If nothing's changed, she should be gone for at least 2 hours. He slipped around to the backyard where a high wooden fence enclosed a small patio. A heavy Rottweiler named Brutus used to prowl back here, but Ross remembered that he'd trained the dog as a puppy. Maybe that bond still held. Sure enough, Brutus padded around the corner. The moment Ross whistled, the big dog's ears perked up. Instead of growling, Brutus bounded over, tail wagging hesitantly. Ross crouched low, offering his hand. "Hey, big guy," he whispered, heart pounding from a twinge of guilt at breaking into his mother-in-law's place. "Long time no see." Brutus sniffed, then let out a low bark of recognition, licking Ross's hand. "Good boy," Ross murmured. He patted the dog's head, then moved to the patio door. He'd once known exactly where Stephanie hid her spare key. Hoping that habit hadn't changed, he lifted a faux rock near the potted fern. Jackpot. Moments later, Ross stepped into a tidy kitchen. The faint scent of lemon cleaner and old coffee hung in the air. I should be quick. He quietly shut the door, letting Brutus follow. He checked a small roll-top desk near the window, rummaging through letters and bills. Nothing revealing. Then he found a laptop resting on a side table. Perfect. Booting it up, he was met with a password prompt. On a hunch, Ross typed John 3:16, recalling Stephanie's staunch religiosity. The screen blinked, then granted access. She never changes. His heart raced as he navigated to her emails. Searching Miranda, he found sporadic messages from an address that matched Miranda's. The earliest ones were full of accusations about Ross. He's scum. He's in prison where he belongs. But a few months ago, the tone shifted. One subject line read, "Moving again, El Paso." Ross scanned the brief email. "Mom, Garrett has a new job in El Paso. Chloe is fine, but money is tight. Don't bother visiting unless you want an argument. I'll let you know if we need more." A wave of relief washed over him. El Paso, that confirms it. He dug deeper, finding photos in the pictures folder. Dozens of old family shots, then more recent ones. Ross's breath caught at an image of Chloe, about 10, standing in front of a theme park sign with a forced half-smile. She's taller now, his eyes stung with tears. He copied everything onto a thumb drive he'd brought, feeling both elated and heartsick. His little girl had grown so much in these stolen years. Just then, Brutus let out a soft growl. The front door rattled. "Stephanie? Home already?" Panic flooded Ross. He quickly ejected the drive and shut down the laptop, pocketing the spare key. Footsteps sounded in the living room. Ross pressed himself to the wall. Through a crack in the kitchen doorway, he glimpsed a neighbor stepping in with a grocery bag, calling, "Stephanie? You there?" Ross cursed silently. I forgot she might have a friend with a key. As quietly as possible, he slipped back to the patio door, signaled for Brutus to stay. The dog wagged his tail but didn't bark. Ross eased outside, heart hammering. Once in the yard, he scrambled over the fence, dropping into the alley. Sweat beaded on his brow. He forced himself to keep calm, sliding into his car before the neighbor could spot him. Speeding away, Ross clutched the thumb drive as though it were a ticket to salvation. El Paso, that's where Miranda's hiding. His mind buzzed with images of Chloe, her eyes, her posture. He brushed away tears. "I'm coming for you, kiddo. Just wait for me." That evening, tension coiled in Ross's chest. The revelation that Miranda was in El Paso with Garrett McNeil both thrilled and terrified him. I'm so close to finding Chloe. But the effort, the secrets, the moral compromises, everything weighed heavily on him. Needing a release, he found himself driving through the bright city lights, aimlessly scouring for a distraction. One night, he told himself. One night to forget it all, then I'll refocus. Ross parked near a row of neon-lit venues that advertised everything from jazz clubs to late-night diners. A discreet sign reading Elysium Escorts Upscale Service caught his eye. He remembered a recommendation he'd overheard at a bar, someone praising a particular escort for her empathy and discretion, the name Ava Sawyer. Before he could second-guess, Ross dialed the number. A smooth voice answered, arranged a meet in a lounge downtown. He half expected regrets to slam him, but the numbness was stronger. He wanted comfort, even if it was paid for. An hour later, Ross sat at a quiet corner booth in a dimly lit lounge. The walls glowed with warm, amber lights, a slow jazz melody drifting from hidden speakers. He nursed a whiskey, feeling oddly exposed, until a soft voice murmured, "Ross?" He looked up. A woman stood before him, tall despite having a subtle prosthetic leg that was scarcely noticeable under tailored slacks. She wore a fitted black blouse, blonde hair in gentle waves, and a calm confidence in her blue eyes. "Hi, I'm Aveline," she said, offering a small smile. "But friends call me Ava." For a moment, Ross just stared, taken aback by how natural she seemed. Not the forced glamour he expected. "Hey," he managed, standing to pull out her chair. "Nice to meet you." She settled gracefully, crossing her legs. "You look tense," Ava observed, her tone gentle. "Long day?" Ross let out a dry laugh. "More like a long 5 years." Ava tilted her head, studying him. "We all have stories, I guess. You want to talk about it or just drift away tonight?" He took a sip of whiskey, feeling heat spread through his chest. "Maybe both, if that's allowed." She shrugged, lips curving in a sympathetic smile. "I'm not big on rules, except the ones that keep us safe." They spent a good hour chatting, the conversation flowing easier than Ross anticipated. He found himself opening up about bits of his life, nothing too incriminating, but enough for Ava to sense his pain. A lost marriage, a missing child, the weight of regrets. Ava listened with surprising sincerity, occasionally offering her own glimpses of hardship. "I lost my leg in a motorcycle accident," she confessed quietly, tapping her prosthetic. "Medical bills piled up. I turned to this job to survive. Been meaning to get out, but sometimes life holds you hostage with its demands, you know?" Ross felt a pang of empathy. He'd never considered an escort's background. We're all just trying to make it. At some point, the lounge's soft lighting, the lull of music, and the shared confessions forged a sense of closeness. They decided to leave together, heading to a nearby boutique hotel. Behind closed doors, they shared a gentle intimacy. Ross reveled in the warmth of another human being after years of barren loneliness. Ava's prosthetic leg brushed against his calf, but if anything, it reminded him how everyone bore hidden scars. They exchanged tender touches and hushed words, never crossing explicit lines. For Ross, the night felt more like emotional shelter than mere physical release. Later, they lay side by side on the crisp white sheets, the city lights casting faint patterns on the ceiling. Ava turned her head, catching Ross's gaze. "You okay?" He inhaled deeply. "I needed this. Maybe I needed you. Just for one night." She offered a half smile. "Happy to help. Gotta admit, you're different from most clients. There's a sadness in you that's real." Ross closed his eyes, shame flickering at how he'd paid for comfort. But the genuine compassion in Ava's words soothed him. "Yeah, my life's a mess, but I'm trying to fix things. My daughter, I have to find her." Ava's expression softened. "I hope you do." They talked a bit longer, about random topics, favorite movies, the best pizza in town, strangely normal conversation in an otherwise unusual setting. By dawn, Ross gently parted from Ava's arms, feeling a knot in his chest unwind just a little. Before they left the room, she wrote her number on a small notepad. "In case you need someone to talk to," she offered. "Not just business." Ross tucked it into his wallet. "Thank you." And despite all the complexities, he meant it. He walked out into the morning light feeling a bittersweet sense of relief. He hadn't forgotten his mission, but for a few hours, he'd felt almost human again. 2 days after meeting Ava, Ross was back in his cheap motel room, barely functional AC rattling overhead. He paced anxiously, waiting for a call from the PI. Finally, his phone buzzed. Detective Kennedy's voice crackled through. "Ross? I've got a solid lead. Miranda Turner is indeed in El Paso with a Garrett McNeil. She's registered under her maiden name, but I confirmed from property records." Ross nearly dropped the phone. That's amazing. Chloe's with her?" "Neighbors confirm seeing a young girl, about 10, matching Chloe's description," Kennedy said. "I have an address, but you'll need more than just a knock on the door to get custody. Might want to brace yourself for a fight." Ross swallowed hard. "I understand. Thanks, Detective." He scribbled the address, heart thumping. So it's true. Chloe's in El Paso. Relief warred with dread. Miranda wouldn't hand over Chloe willingly, but at least he finally knew where to go. After ending the call, he dialed his parents. Marshal Draven picked up, and Ross explained the breakthrough in a rush of words. "I'm heading there tomorrow. Dad, I need financial help. Lawyers, maybe. I can't do this alone." Marshall's voice trembled with a mix of relief and concern. "We'll do whatever it takes, son. Your mother's been worried sick. Come home first if you need to. We can drive down together." Ross's chest tightened at the thought of facing them, but he realized he had no choice. "Okay, I'll leave soon. Thanks, Dad." His mind drifted to Ava Sawyer's number. Part of him wanted to call, share the news, or at least say goodbye. But he hesitated. She's just someone I met for one night, yet something about her honesty and kindness tugged at him. An hour later, Ross found himself sitting in a noisy diner, phone in hand. He pressed dial. Ava answered after 2 rings, her voice warm with recognition. "Ross? Everything all right?" He cleared his throat. I'm leaving Dallas. Found a lead on my daughter. Gotta head west." A pause. "That's good news, right? I'm happy for you." "Yeah, just wanted to say thanks. For the other night. It meant more than you realize." He could almost hear Ava's gentle smile over the phone. "I'm glad. Take care of yourself, okay? And if you need someone to talk to, I'm here." Ross felt a confusing swirl of gratitude and regret. "I appreciate that. Maybe I'll call you when things settle down." "All right, good luck," she said softly. Then the line clicked off. Ross stared at his phone, exhaling. Focus on Chloe. He paid for his half-eaten burger and returned to the motel, packing up the few belongings he had. By dawn, he was on the highway. The sun peeked over the horizon, illuminating the open road. His mind buzzed with conflicting emotions, the bitterness of losing 5 years, the hope of reuniting with Chloe, the fear of facing Miranda again, and a flicker of something else, an odd sense of possibility, perhaps ignited by the memory of Ava's empathetic gaze. As the city skyline receded in his rearview mirror, Ross tightened his grip on the wheel. No more delays. He'd call his parents from the next rest stop, coordinate their departure to El Paso. Each mile brought him closer to a showdown with Miranda, to the child he'd been forced away from, yet for the first time in ages, he felt a stirring of optimism. He had a name, Garrett McNeil. He had an address. "Chloe, hang on," he silently pleaded. "Your dad's coming." With that unwavering thought, Ross Draven pressed the gas pedal, leaving Dallas behind. He didn't know if the road ahead would bring closure or chaos, but after so many years of yearning and searching, he was ready to face it all. Ross Draven pressed the accelerator as the desert highway stretched before him, a shimmering ribbon of asphalt under the midday sun. In the back seat, boxes of hastily packed belongings rattled with each bump. He'd arranged to meet his parents, Marshall and Beatrice, at a modest roadside motel a few hours east of El Paso. They insisted on making the final leg of the journey together. He pulled in around late afternoon, dust kicking up behind his sedan. A faded sign reading 3 Palms Motel jutted from the gravel lot. 2 actual palm trees, both drooping in the scorching heat, provided a sliver of shade near the entrance. As Ross parked, he spotted his father's Lincoln. The sight squeezed his chest with both relief and tension. Stepping out, he felt the dry desert wind brush his face. The motel facade was chipped and sun-bleached, the kind of place that might have seen better days in the 80s. Fitting, Ross thought. I'm not exactly in the best shape either. He heard voices around the corner, familiar ones. Following the sound, he found Marshal Draven in front of a vending machine, fishing quarters out of his pocket, while Beatrice hovered nearby. Marshal looked up, startled. Ross. Beatrice spun around, eyes immediately shining with tears. "Oh, honey!" She rushed over, arms wide. Ross let her pull him into a tight embrace, feeling a decade's worth of guilt and longing crash over him. "Hi, Mom," he murmured, blinking back emotion. "Thanks for coming." Marshall stepped forward, clearing his throat. "We're your parents, son. Where else would we be?" He placed a firm hand on Ross's shoulder. Despite the gruffness, Ross recognized the warmth in his father's gaze. They moved to a picnic table near the motel's office. The air smelled faintly of hot pavement and cheap laundry detergent. Ross updated them on what he knew. Miranda living in El Paso with a man named Garrett McNeil, Chloe around 10 years old. He explained how a private investigator had pinpointed their address. Beatrice clutched Ross's hand. "We've missed her so much," she whispered. "Miranda cut off all contact with us, too. We tried everything, but she blocked our calls, returned letters unopened. It was awful not knowing where Chloe was." "I know," Ross said, voice thick. "I never stopped thinking about my girl, and about how my own choices led here." He exhaled, glancing at Marshall. "Dad, I'm sorry. I messed up." Marshall shook his head, stopping him. "That's all in the past, Ross. We can't change it, only do better now." Ross looked away, swallowing relief. Then he drew a deep breath, forging ahead. "I hired a lawyer, Vivian Hall. She works in El Paso and has a good reputation with family court. She set an appointment for tomorrow morning. I want your help, both of you, when we present my case." Beatrice squeezed his arm. "Of course. We'll do whatever it takes. Chloe deserves to know she's still loved by her father, by her grandparents." Marshall nodded. "We'll stand by you in court, but be warned, son, Miranda isn't going to roll over. She can get vicious." Ross's jaw tightened. He recalled the cunning manipulations she'd used in their divorce. "I know, but I have to try. I won't lose Chloe again." They decided to spend the night at the motel, to leave early for El Paso in the morning. Over stale coffee in the small lobby, they hammered out details, meeting Vivian at her office, filing for partial custody or at least visitation. Marshall promised financial backing, though money was tight after the last few years. Ross felt a pang of gratitude he'd had to rely on unsavory methods to gather funds, but his parents, despite their disappointment, still offered unwavering support. That evening, Ross stepped outside. The desert sky blazed with stars, unhindered by city lights. Beatrice joined him, handing him a lukewarm soda. "You okay?" Ross took a sip, eyes on the wide sky. "I'm anxious, scared. What if Chloe doesn't want to see me? She was 5 when I last held her. She might not even remember much." Beatrice placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "You're her father. Children sense who truly loves them, no matter the time lost. Just be honest, gentle. She'll come around." Ross managed a half-smile, though doubts gnawed at him. He hoped the cold reality of his prison record wouldn't overshadow the warmth he still felt for his daughter. Together, he and his mother stood in silence, letting the desert breeze rustle their hair, silently bracing for the battle ahead. They left the motel at dawn, the Lincoln rumbling toward El Paso. By mid-morning, they pulled into a tidy downtown block. Ross found Hall and Associates displayed on a polished sign outside a low-rise building with mirrored windows. Inside, the reception area was all sleek lines and neutral tones. A sharp-eyed receptionist guided them to Vivian Hall's office. The lawyer was a poised woman in her late 40s, wearing a tailored navy blazer, dark hair neatly pinned. She greeted them with a firm handshake. "Mr. Draven, Mr. and Mrs. Draven, pleased to meet you. Sit, please." She gestured to plush chairs. "I've reviewed your file and the documents you provided. We have a strong case for re-establishing contact with your daughter, especially given your parole completion and no new incidents on record." Her gaze flicked over Ross's tense posture. Ross cleared his throat. "I want more than contact. I believe Chloe's in a bad environment with Miranda and this Garrett, but I realize I need to start with visitation." Vivian nodded. "Precisely. We'll request an expedited hearing for temporary visitation. If we show sufficient reason to suspect Miranda's an unfit guardian, the judge might grant us more, maybe emergency custody if we find serious issues. She glanced at Marshall and Beatrice. Your testimony about Miranda's efforts to alienate the child from her father and grandparents will be crucial. Beatrice looked resolved. Miranda refused all our calls and even threatened a restraining order if we tried to see Chloe. We only want to make sure our granddaughter's safe. Vivian took notes. Let's move quickly. Family courts here can be unpredictable. But given the circumstances, I sense the judge might be sympathetic. I'll file for an immediate hearing, possibly within a few days. She looked at Ross. You must remain calm. Present yourself as a loving parent who's turned his life around. No outbursts. Miranda's attorney will likely paint you as violent. Ross pressed his lips together. I understand. I've learned my lesson the hard way. Outside the office, the Dravins paused under the bright El Paso sun. Ross squared his shoulders. It's happening, he thought. I'm finally taking a stand to get my daughter back. 2 days later, the courthouse smelled of disinfectant and old paper. Ross tugged at the collar of his freshly ironed shirt, nerves threatening to devour him. Vivian Hall led him and his parents down a corridor to a small conference room. A social worker from Child Protective Services, Nadia Flores, was waiting. Nadia, a petite woman with keen brown eyes, gave them a polite nod. Mr. Draven, I've read the judge's preliminary order. He's allowing you a 3-hour supervised meeting with Chloe, effective immediately, in a neutral setting, her school's administration office. I'll accompany you, observe the interaction, and report back. Ross's heart thumped. Right now? Nadia smiled gently. Yes, we want the child's best interests served quickly. Let's head over to Mesa Verde Elementary. Miranda's supposed to pick Chloe up after class. We'll get there first. Beatrice and Marshall exchanged anxious looks. Ross inhaled a shaky breath. All right, let's do this. The school sat in a suburban neighborhood ringed by manicured lawns and desert shrubs. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the pavement as Ross, his parents, and Nadia entered the front office. A receptionist directed them to the principal's office, a modest space with pastel walls and children's artwork pinned around. Principal Givens, a tall woman in a floral blouse, looked uneasy. We received the court order. I've already called Chloe out of her last class. She's in the counseling room. You understand this is highly irregular. Nadia stepped in. Yes, but it's authorized by Judge Turner. Thank you for your cooperation. Moments later, a door opened. A petite figure stepped inside Chloe Draven. Ross's breath caught. His daughter was taller, her hair in 2 neat braids, wearing sneakers and a bright green t-shirt that said, Go Wildcats. She glanced around uncertainly, and then her gaze landed on Ross. Everything else fell away. Ross's eyes stung. She's grown so much. For a moment, he worried she wouldn't recognize him. But then her eyes widened, flicking to the grandparents behind him. Beatrice gasped. Chloe, sweetie! Chloe hesitated, her brow knitted. Slowly, she stepped forward. Grandma? Grandpa? Her voice wobbled, torn between excitement and confusion. She allowed Beatrice to hug her, then Marshall stooped to plant a gentle kiss on her forehead, the same gesture he'd done when she was little. Ross stood back, heart pounding. Finally, Chloe turned to him. Uncertainty flickered across her face. Are you? She was on the verge of tears. Ross's throat constricted. I'm your dad, he managed, voice trembling. I've missed you so much, baby girl. In that moment, something seemed to click for her, maybe a distant memory of fatherly hugs or bedtime stories. She took a tentative step closer. Dad, she whispered, then hurled herself into his arms. Ross closed his eyes, tears spilling, holding her gently. My daughter. The world felt complete, if only for an instant. Nadia observed discreetly, making notes. After a few minutes of tearful reunion, she cleared her throat gently. Why don't we sit and talk? Let Chloe get to know everyone in a calmer setting. They moved to a small table. Ross asked shy questions about Chloe's school, her favorite hobbies. She answered shyly at first, but soon brightened when talking about her love for drawing and the school's soccer team. Marshall and Beatrice chimed in, praising her progress. Nadia watched their dynamic, a faint smile on her face. Then the door flew open, slamming against the wall. Miranda Turner stormed in, her expression thunderous. "What the hell is this?" she hissed. Axel was nowhere to be seen, but that hardly mattered. Miranda seemed furious enough on her own. She seized Chloe's arm, yanking her up. "We're leaving!" Chloe cried out. "Mom, stop! You're hurting me!" Ross jerked to his feet. "Don't grab her like that!" Beatrice gasped, placing a hand over her mouth. Marshall frowned, ready to intervene. Nadia stepped forward, voice firm. "Mrs. Turner, there's a court order your daughter is permitted a supervised visit with her father. You can't interfere." She gestured to the paperwork. Miranda's face twisted with rage. "Court order, my ass. Ross is an ex-con. He's dangerous. Chloe is my daughter, and I'm not letting him fill her head with lies." Chloe looked stricken, tears welling. "Mom, I just want to talk to Dad and Grandpa and Grandma. Why are you so mad?" Miranda ignored her pleas, glaring daggers at Ross. "This is your doing," she spat. "You can't leave me alone, can you? Had to track us down, ruin our lives." Ross kept his voice steady, though adrenaline surged. "I just want to see my daughter. It's been years." Principal Givens intervened gently. "Miss Turner, please calm down. You're causing a scene in front of the children." Indeed, some curious students peered through the open doorway. Miranda's cheeks flamed. She loosened her grip on Chloe. Nadia gently guided the girl aside. "You have no right," Miranda hissed at Ross. "You gave up all rights when you went to prison." Ross clenched his jaw. "I paid for my mistakes. The judge disagrees with you, which is why we're here." Miranda sputtered a string of insults, turning on Nadia. "This is harassment. I'll file a lawsuit against you and that crooked judge." Her voice soared in pitch. Nadia remained calm, showing the official documents. "If you don't comply, you risk contempt of court. Let Chloe finish her visitation or we'll have to call security." For a moment, it seemed Miranda might strike Nadia or Ross, but she spun on her heel, practically shaking with fury. "Fine," she snarled. "Have your little session. But don't think this changes anything, Ross." She stabbed a finger in his direction. "Chloe is mine. I'm not done fighting." With that, she stormed out, letting the door slam behind her. A hush fell over the room. Chloe stood there, trembling, tears streaking her cheeks. Ross, voice soft, approached his daughter again. "It's all right, sweetie. Nobody's going to hurt you." She nodded, sniffling. The Dravens led her to a chair, wrapping her in comfort. Nadia quietly resumed her observation. Ross's heart ached as he realized how many battles lay ahead. This is only the beginning, but for now he cherished every second with his daughter. They had so many lost years to reclaim, so many moments to share. If Miranda wanted a fight, Ross would fight. He'd do it all to protect Chloe. 2 days after the tense meeting at school, Vivian Hall summoned Ross and his mother Beatrice for an urgent discussion. They sat in Vivian's office amid scattered files and half-empty coffee cups. Vivian's expression was grim. "Mr. Draven, Mrs. Draven, we've received some alarming information from Child Protective Services. Nadia Flores believes there are serious issues at Miranda's home. She's found grounds to inspect the environment more closely." Ross shot a worried look at his mother. "What kind of issues?" Vivian laced her fingers. "Hints that Garrett McNeil might be involved in inappropriate behavior, potential child endangerment. Nadia wants to conduct a home visit. She's asked if Mrs. Draven would accompany her as a grandmother figure to reassure Chloe while they check the living conditions." Beatrice's eyes widened. "Of course, I'll do it. If Chloe's in danger, God, Ross." Ross felt his pulse thunder. "I'll come too." Vivian shook her head. "Nadia says no. Miranda's already on edge about you. If you show up without a court order granting a search, it could cause legal complications. Let's trust the social worker's process." Reluctantly, Ross agreed. Someone has to protect Chloe from whatever's going on in that house. Beatrice arrived at Miranda's small rental house in a quiet El Paso neighborhood. The yard looked neglected, with a few toys scattered across dead grass. Nadia Flores stepped out of her CPS vehicle, clipboard in hand, giving Beatrice a comforting nod. "We'll be polite but firm," Nadia said. "Remember, if we sense immediate danger to Chloe, we'll call the police." Beatrice's heart hammered. She couldn't believe Miranda had sunk so low that a social worker had to investigate her household. But if it keeps Chloe safe, they rang the doorbell. After a tense minute, Miranda appeared, scowling. "What do you want?" Nadia presented her credentials calmly. "We're conducting a welfare check on Chloe Draven. The court gave us authority to verify her safety. May we come in?" Miranda's nostrils flared. "You can't do that without—" Nadia raised a brow. "Would you prefer I call the police for a forced entry warrant?" Miranda hesitated, eyes flicking to Beatrice. "Fine, but be quick." Inside, the living room smelled faintly of stale cigarettes. A couch was piled with laundry, and the TV blared some daytime talk show. Miranda refused to call Chloe down, insisting the girl was napping. Nadia began a walkthrough, asking Miranda routine questions. Beatrice, nerves on edge, spotted a plush teddy bear on a side table. It had an odd glint in its plastic eyes. She picked it up, curious. "Is that a camera lens?" She exchanged a sharp look with Nadia. The social worker took the teddy bear, examining it discreetly. Her jaw tightened. "Miranda," Nadia said evenly, "what's this?" Miranda's gaze flickered. "Just a toy." "Chloe likes teddy bears?" Nadia lowered her voice, fury barely contained. "There's a hidden camera embedded in here. This isn't a typical child's toy." Beatrice felt a chill run down her spine. Why would there be a camera in Chloe's teddy? Miranda's face paled for a split second before she sneered. "How should I know? Maybe Chloe messed around, or Garrett did. It's none of your concern." Nadia signaled Beatrice to step into the hallway. There, they found a slightly ajar door leading to a cluttered home office, likely Garrett's workspace. On a desk, a computer sat with multiple external drives. Nadia approached it, though Miranda hovered, bristling. "You can't snoop around here," Miranda snapped. But Nadia pressed on. "Children's welfare trumps privacy in a potential abuse case." She pulled out her phone, snapping pictures of the setup. "Mrs. Draven, stand by the door, please." Beatrice complied, heart pounding. She glanced inside the office, noticing suspicious file names on the screen. Chloe birthday, MP4, Chloe homework, JPG. The pit of her stomach twisted with dread. "Stop it!" Miranda rushed forward, trying to shut the laptop. Nadia deftly blocked her, capturing more images. Then Miranda, voice shrill, spat out something horrifying. "You're all reading this wrong. Chloe's not some innocent kid she dresses provocatively, acts like she wants attention." Beatrice blanched. "Miranda, how can you say that? She's 10. Miranda's eyes gleamed with something unhinged. "Oh, please, you have no idea how manipulative she can be. Garrett told me she's always walking around in short shorts, giving him those looks." "Enough!" Nadia interjected, her voice trembling with anger. "Victim-blaming a child is unacceptable. Where is Garrett now?" Miranda folded her arms, refusing to speak. In that moment, Nadia's phone buzzed. She stepped aside to answer a call. Beatrice saw her expression turn grim. "Thank you, officer," Nadia said into the phone. "We're here. We'll secure the premises until you arrive." She hung up, turning to Miranda. "Garrett McNeil is wanted on suspicion of possession of illicit material involving a minor. The police have a warrant to search this property. They'll be here shortly." Miranda's mouth fell open, her confidence cracking. "You can't do this!" Beatrice gathered her courage. "Miranda, what have you done? This camera in Chloe's teddy bear? How could you allow that?" Miranda glared at Beatrice with pure venom. "Don't you judge me. I did what I had to. Garrett said it was harmless. He made me believe—" She trailed off, eyes darting around as if seeking a lie. Beatrice felt sick. "Where is Chloe?" Miranda huffed, turning away. "In her room." Nadia signaled for Beatrice to follow. They rushed down the hall, finding a small bedroom with pink curtains. Chloe sat on the bed, hugging a pillow, eyes red from crying. She jumped up, seeing her grandmother. "Grandma, what's happening? Mom and Garrett were yelling earlier." Beatrice scooped her into a hug. "It's okay, sweet girl. Everything's going to be okay." Nadia approached gently, voice calm. "Chloe, I'm Nadia. We're making sure you're safe. Come with us into the living room, all right?" Chloe clung to Beatrice, trembling. Together, they returned to the front. Outside, sirens sounded. 2 uniformed officers stepped in, handing Miranda a set of papers. She let out a furious shriek, hurling curses at Beatrice and Nadia. The scene spiraled into chaos as the police proceeded to search the premises. Beatrice sat on the couch with Chloe, rubbing the girl's back. Ross needs to know. But for now, all Beatrice could do was hold her granddaughter tight, praying that this nightmare would soon end. By mid-morning the following day, Ross Draven found himself standing in a family courtroom, heart pounding under a crisp button-down shirt. At his side was Vivian Hall, face set with determination. Marshall and Beatrice sat directly behind him, offering moral support. On the other side of the aisle, Miranda fumed silently, flanked by a haggard-looking attorney. Garrett was nowhere to be seen. He'd been taken into custody for questioning. The judge, a non-nonsense woman named Judge Madison, rapped her gavel. "We're here to address custody matters regarding minor child Chloe Draven. The court has reviewed Child Protective Services' preliminary findings of potential abuse under the roof where Miss Miranda Turner resides." Vivian rose. "Your Honor, we seek immediate temporary custody of Chloe Draven for my client, Ross Draven. Child Protective Services has evidence that Miss Turner's partner, Garrett McNeil, possessed inappropriate material. Miss Turner herself was complicit or willfully ignorant." Miranda leapt to her feet, slamming her palm on the table. "I had no idea Garrett was filming anything. This is outrageous. I'm the victim here." She whirled toward Ross. "He set me up. He just wants to steal my child." Judge Madison's cool gaze narrowed. "Mrs. Turner, outbursts are not permitted. Sit down." Miranda slowly sank back into her seat, rage crackling in her eyes. Her attorney tried to salvage the situation. "Your Honor, we dispute the claim that Miss Turner was aware of any wrongdoing. She was manipulated by Mr. McNeil." Judge Madison adjusted her reading glasses. "The evidence suggests otherwise. The camera found in the child's teddy bear, plus images on Mr. McNeil's devices, indicate a pattern of disturbing behavior. CPS is extremely concerned. Miss Turner, do you have any explanation for blaming a 10-year-old child for provocative actions, as alleged by the social worker's report?" Miranda's face flamed. She stammered, "Garrett told me I didn't mean it that way. The judge held up a hand. "Enough. This is very serious. Now, regarding custody, Mr. Draven served time for assault, but has since completed his sentence. We have no recent evidence of violence or danger. CPS testifies that his interactions with Chloe were positive. Miss Flores, please come forward." Nadia Flores stood, recounting the horrifying findings at Miranda's home, the hidden camera, and the bizarre justifications Miranda offered. She concluded, "I believe Chloe is unsafe in Miss Turner's care right now. Mr. Draven, supported by his parents, appears a far more stable environment." Judge Madison turned to Ross. "Mr. Draven, do you understand the responsibility you're asking for? You will be expected to provide a safe, nurturing home for Chloe, free from any criminal activity or associations." Ross steadied himself. "Yes, Your Honor. I've made mistakes, but I'm done with that life. I have a family willing to help, and I'll do whatever it takes to ensure Chloe's well-being. She's my daughter. I want her safe." A hush fell over the courtroom. The judge tapped her pen against the desk. "Given the severity of allegations against Miss Turner and her partner, this court awards temporary custody of Chloe Draven to Mr. Ross Draven, effective immediately pending further investigation. A formal custody hearing will follow, but for now the child must be removed from Miss Turner's household." Miranda shot to her feet, furious tears spilling. "This is insane. You're just handing my daughter over to a criminal?" Marshall stepped forward, fists clenched, but Ross motioned him back. The judge's gavel banged. "Order, Miss Turner. If you continue disrupting the court, I will hold you in contempt." Miranda's attorney tried to restrain her, but Miranda shoved him aside, pointing a shaking finger at Ross. "You'll pay for this," she hissed. Then she turned on the judge. "You're all corrupt." Judge Madison looked to the bailiff. "That's enough. Remove Miss Turner." Chaos erupted as Miranda lunged, cursing at Ross and Vivian. The bailiff and a second officer seized her, cuffing her hands behind her back. She spat insults over her shoulder, eyes wild. Ross stood there, trembling at the sight of his ex-wife being led away in chains. A swirl of relief and sorrow warred in his chest. He remembered when they first married how they were both young, misguided, but not cruel. How did it come to this? Vivian placed a steadying hand on his arm. "You've done it, Ross. For now, Chloe is going home with you." He exhaled, turning to look at Marshall and Beatrice, who shared teary smiles. "We'll take care of her," Beatrice whispered. "Let's just get out of here and bring Chloe somewhere safe." As they filed out of the courtroom, a small knot of reporters loitered in the hallway, likely drawn by the shocking allegations against Garrett. Ross shielded his face, determined to keep Chloe's identity private. Marshall hurried ahead to usher them away. Nadia Flores waited near the exit. She handed Ross a packet of documents. "She's still at our CPS office. We wanted to keep her away from the chaos in the courtroom. You can pick her up now. Start your new life together." Ross stared at the packet. It felt surreal. After all these years, I finally get to bring Chloe home. "Thank you," he murmured, voice thick. "I won't let you down." Nadia offered a gentle smile. "Just be the father she deserves." Outside, the scorching El Paso sun beat down on the pavement. Ross and his parents headed to their car, minds spinning with the finality of the court's decision. Ross's heart hammered with a mix of triumph and anxiety. Could he really step into the role of a full-time dad after everything? But as they drove toward the CPS office, a sense of fierce determination anchored him. "Chloe is mine to protect now. No matter my past mistakes, I'll do right by her." The future still felt uncertain. Miranda's meltdown was proof enough that she wouldn't surrender easily. But for the moment, Ross Draven allowed himself to breathe, to hope. The daughter he'd dreamed of every night in prison was about to sit beside him, ride home with him a new beginning. Ross Draven stood on the front porch of his parents' home, taking in the crisp morning air. The modest two-story house, once a place of strife and guilt, now offered refuge for him and his newly reclaimed daughter, Chloe. Early sunlight bathed the lawn, where dew glistened on the neatly trimmed grass. A light breeze rustled the small flower beds that Beatrice tended daily. It had been a week since Ross legally gained temporary custody of Chloe and whisked her away from El Paso. Together, along with Ross's parents, they made the drive back to his old hometown. At first, Chloe was subdued, clutching her stuffed unicorn in the back seat. But each passing mile seemed to peel away her tension, replaced by curiosity about her father's childhood haunts. Now, in the early days of their new life together, Ross found himself navigating an unexpected mix of joys and challenges. He walked inside, closing the screen door softly. In the living room, he spotted Chloe curled up on the sofa with a morning cartoon playing at low volume. "Hey, kiddo," Ross said softly, taking a seat next to her. She turned, eyes brightening. "Morning, Dad," she replied. Her voice was tender with lingering sleepiness. They'd developed a gentle routine. Mornings started with Beatrice's generous breakfast spreads: pancakes, sausages, fruit salad. Then Ross would drive Chloe to therapy sessions twice a week with a local counselor who specialized in childhood trauma. Chloe never complained. She seemed to realize, at 10 years old, that healing required confronting tough memories. Ross was painfully aware of Chloe's nightmares about Garrett. 2 nights ago, he jolted awake to the sound of her muffled cries. Rushing down the hallway, he found her trembling under the covers, tears staining her cheeks. She clung to Ross, sobbing words about hidden cameras and that sickening feeling of always being watched. As father and daughter, they shared a moment of raw vulnerability, Ross gently stroking her hair, whispering reassurances until she drifted back to an uneasy sleep. Deep down, he seethed with rage at Miranda for allowing such harm. Yet, he also reminded himself he had to focus on the present, on providing safety and love. This morning, Ross reached over and ruffled Chloe's hair. "What do you say we head into town after breakfast? Maybe grab some new clothes or a poster for your room?" Chloe's eyes lit up. "Yes, please," she exclaimed, enthusiasm creeping into her tone. She'd been cautious around Ross, unsure how to act. But day by day, she seemed to relax. Marshall Draven strolled into the living room wearing a flannel shirt, his expression softening at the sight of his granddaughter smiling. "You two planning an outing?" he asked. Ross nodded. "Going to pick up a few supplies for Chloe's room. She wants a cool poster or something." Marshall grinned. "Sounds good. I'll finish painting that last section of the walls while you're out. Gotta make it a real bedroom for her." Despite their past tensions, Marshall had embraced grandparenthood with unwavering devotion. A few minutes later, Beatrice called them in for breakfast. They sat around the dining table, plates piled high. Between bites of syrupy pancakes, Chloe peppered Ross with questions. Did you really grow up in this house? Which window was your bedroom? Did Grandpa ever tell you stories about dinosaurs when you were little? Ross chuckled, trading teasing banter with his mother while Marshall looked on with pride. In these simple domestic moments, Ross felt a sense of awe. This is fatherhood, something he feared he'd lost forever. A month into living under his parents' roof, Ross began thinking about the future. He had a plan. Use the small remaining savings plus a modest loan from Marshall to open a combined computer repair and web design shop in town. But first, he had to ensure Chloe was fully settled. Her therapy progressed well. She seemed less haunted, though the nights remained unpredictable. One Saturday, Ross spotted a flyer for a local charity run and bicycle event along the riverside. Eager to give Chloe a fun outing, he signed them both up for the short, family-friendly route. It was a sweltering afternoon, the sun high overhead, when Ross and Chloe pedaled side by side among other participants. The scenic path wound past tall trees and a glistening river. "Dad, slow down!" Chloe called, giggling as Ross picked up speed. He eased off, letting her catch up, her cheeks flushed with excitement. They reached the finish line, breathless and laughing. Volunteers handed out water bottles and fruit snacks. Chloe downed her water gratefully, face shining with triumph. As Ross approached a nearby booth for more refreshments, he almost dropped his cup at the sight of a familiar figure. She stood near a canopy tent, a professional camera slung over one shoulder. She wore athletic leggings and a bright tank top, her prosthetic leg visible but unobtrusive. A glint of recognition sparked in her blue eyes when she spotted Ross. "Ross!" she called, stepping forward. Her voice contained a blend of surprise and warmth. "I can't believe this." Ross's heart thumped. Memories of their night together in Dallas resurfaced her gentle kindness, the comfort she offered when he was at his lowest. "Ava. Wow, hi," he managed, glancing at Chloe. "I didn't know you lived around here." Ava shook her head, a playful smile touching her lips. I moved up this way a few weeks ago for a marketing job. They hired me to do event photography." She patted her camera. "The run organizers brought me in to capture the day." Chloe appeared at Ross's side, eyeing Ava curiously. "Dad, who's this?" Ross cleared his throat, feeling an odd mix of pride and nervousness. "Chloe, this is my friend Ava. She's someone who helped me in Dallas." Ava crouched slightly, offering a bright smile to Chloe. "Hi there. You were amazing out there on the bike. I snapped some cool shots of you finishing." Chloe's eyes lit up. "Really? Can I see them?" "Definitely," Ava replied, straightening up. She glanced at Ross. "We can find a place to talk, maybe after I'm done shooting." Ross met her gaze, recalling how they'd parted on uncertain terms, exchanging phone numbers with the vague promise of staying in touch. He nodded. "Yeah, that'd be nice." A flutter of hope stirred in his chest. Once the event wrapped, Ross and Chloe joined Ava at a cozy cafe by the river. They settled at an outdoor table, warm breezes carrying the scent of flowers. Ava showed Chloe the digital shots on her camera, a beaming girl crossing the finish line, sunlight glinting off her helmet. "These are so cool," Chloe exclaimed. "Can we get prints, Dad?" Ross smiled. "Of course." He looked to Ava. "I'll pay for whatever we need." Ava waved off the offer. "It's on me. Anything to celebrate Chloe's success." Chloe then asked for permission to explore the flower garden around the cafe's patio, leaving Ross and Ava alone. As Chloe wandered off, Ava turned her attention back to Ross. "Last time we met," she began gently, "you were searching for your daughter in Dallas. I see you found her." Ross nodded, a shy grin crossing his face. "Yeah, a lot happened. Got custody, brought her home with me, still feels surreal." Ava's expression glowed with happiness for him. "I'm so glad. You look lighter, you know, like a weight's been lifted." Ross exhaled, remembering the pain he once carried like a physical burden. It has, though it's still complicated. Miranda's facing legal trouble, Chloe's adjusting to a new life, and I'm trying to launch a small business, but it feels hopeful. Ava reached for his hand across the table, giving it a gentle squeeze. "Sometimes hopeful is all we need." Then, with a playful half-smile, she added, "So, you're back in your hometown? Any chance you'd like to show me around?" Ross's heart skipped. He searched Ava's face, reading genuine warmth in her gaze. "That'd be great," he said quietly. "I'd love for you to get to know Chloe a bit more, too, if you're comfortable." Ava nodded, eyes bright. "I am." She glanced toward the garden where Chloe examined daisies, a thoughtful tilt to her head. "She seems wonderful and strong." Ross swallowed the wave of gratitude coursing through him. "She's been through hell, but yeah, she's strong." They lingered over iced coffee, chatting about the small details of life, Ava's new job with a marketing company, Ross's upcoming plans for the computer shop, Chloe's therapy progress. It felt strangely normal, even sweet, to sit across from the woman who once offered him solace in the darkest chapter of his life. At one point, Chloe returned, beaming, clutching a handful of wildflowers she found near the fence. She handed them to Ava with a shy smile. "Here, so you can take more pictures," she said, innocence shining in her eyes. Ava accepted them, touched. "Thank you, Chloe. They're beautiful." She shared a quick glance with Ross, a silent acknowledgement that life might just be weaving them together in an unexpected new pattern. As weeks passed, Ava began spending more time with Ross and Chloe, joining them for homemade dinners or weekend outings around town. The Draven household buzzed with a warmth Ross had never felt before. Even Marshall, ever cautious, appreciated Ava's grounded presence. Beatrice welcomed her with open arms, grateful that someone understood Ross's baggage yet still saw the good in him. One evening, after Chloe had gone to bed, Ross and Ava lounged on the porch swing, enjoying the cool breeze. The crickets chirped, stars freckled the sky. Ava gently rested her head on Ross's shoulder. "Are you okay?" she asked softly, sensing his tension. He sighed. "There's something I need to tell you. Something darker about my time in prison." Ava shifted, sitting upright, her gaze steady. "Go on." Ross's throat tightened. "I did more than survive. I arranged for someone to die. Not with my own hands, but I paid an outside gang to kill a man named Iron Rock, a monster who terrorized me and others." His voice trembled with old guilt. "I felt justified at the time he tortured a friend, but it still haunts me." Ava's eyes brimmed with compassion. She didn't flinch. "That must have been horrible living with that choice." Ross nodded, stomach twisting. "I guess I wanted you to know. In case it changes your view of me." His heart pounded, half expecting her to recoil or leave. Instead, Ava laced her fingers through his. "Ross, I sold my body once to pay hospital bills. We all do desperate things under extreme circumstances. I'm not judging you, though it's scary. But you're trying to move forward, be a better person for Chloe, right?" He let out a shaky breath, relief washing over him. "Yes, every day I remind myself I'm not that man anymore." She gave a faint smile. "We carry our past, but it doesn't define us unless we let it. You can still choose who you become next." Ross blinked away tears. "Thank you," he whispered, voice thick with gratitude. They sat there a while longer, hands entwined, sharing the quiet acceptance of two people who'd seen life's harsher edges but still dared to hope. A gentle night wind stirred the porch swing, almost as if offering them silent encouragement. A few months later, Ross's small computer repair and web design shop, Draven Tech, held its modest grand opening on a bustling corner of the downtown strip. Chloe helped create a hand-drawn sign for the door, and Marshall provided financial backing for initial inventory. Beatrice baked cookies for visitors. Even some local reporters dropped by for a brief interview, highlighting a resilient father's fresh start. Ava was there too, camera in hand, capturing candid snapshots of Ross and Chloe behind the reception counter. She'd recently pivoted to more freelance work, letting her set her own schedule. The two supported each other's ambitions, forging a partnership that felt both natural and exhilarating. One evening, after they closed the shop, Ross drove Chloe home and found Ava waiting on the front porch with Beatrice, chatting about a local photography exhibit. The sky was streaked with pink and orange, the sun dipping behind distant hills. As Ross walked up the steps, Chloe scampered inside to feed the family cat, leaving Ross and Ava alone. She turned to him, eyes shining. "Hey, business owner," she teased lightly. "You look good behind that counter." Ross chuckled. Better than an orange jumpsuit, that's for sure. He took her hand, a nervous flutter in his stomach. Listen, there's something I've been thinking about. Ava quirked an eyebrow. Ho. That tone sounds serious. He glanced toward the doorway where Beatrice hovered, smiling encouragingly before retreating inside. Ross guided Ava down the steps to the yard, where a simple wooden bench overlooked the small rose garden. I know we're not perfect people, Ross began, voice steady despite his racing pulse. But we've shared a lot dark secrets, second chances. I love how you connect with Chloe, how you see me as more than my past. Ava inhaled, eyes already misty. Ross. He pulled a small jewelry box from his pocket, flipping it open to reveal a modest ring. It wasn't flashy, just a simple band with a tiny diamond, all he could afford. Will you stay with me? Maybe not a big fancy wedding right away, but a life together. Chloe loves you. I do too. Ava covered her mouth, emotion shining in her eyes. Ah, yes, Ross, she said with a laugh, tears slipping down her cheeks. Of course, yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger, heart soaring with relief and joy. In that instant, Chloe popped her head out the door, curiosity piqued by the sudden commotion. Dad, are you okay? Ava, why are you crying? Ava laughed, waving her over. Good tears, Chloe. She crouched to meet Chloe's eye level, holding out the ringed hand. Your dad asked me to be part of your family. Chloe looked from the ring to Ross, her face lighting up. She threw her arms around Ava, then turned to Ross. Does this mean she's gonna be like my stepmom? Ross knelt beside them, hugging Chloe too. Only if you're okay with that. Chloe beamed. I love it. I want Ava around all the time. In the doorway, Marshall and Beatrice stood, tears in their own eyes. They'd struggled for so long, fearing Ross might never find redemption or love. Now, they witnessed this tender scene under the twilight sky, hearts brimming with gratitude. Over the next few days, news of Ross's engagement spread among friends and neighbors. Some recalled his troubled past with skepticism, but far more admired his resilience. Together, Ross, Ava, and Chloe navigated the final legal steps to secure permanent custody. Miranda, presumably out on a shortened sentence or having fled with Garrett, no longer posed a threat. Chloe's therapy continued, but each session ended with hope she slept more peacefully, no longer fearing hidden lenses or late-night arguments. Her drawings now featured bright rainbows, family scenes, and a blonde woman with a prosthetic leg standing proudly beside a man with a big, hopeful grin. Every so often, Ross felt a pang of regret for the years lost, the mistakes made. But each time, he'd glance at Chloe giggling in the kitchen with Ava, or see Marshall patiently teaching her how to fish at the nearby lake, and realize this is what second chances are for. They never pretended life was flawless. Ross's scars from prison didn't vanish, nor did Ava's memories of hardship, but together, they learned to embrace tomorrow. And so, in a modest house in a quiet neighborhood, under the gentle watch of supportive grandparents, a once-broken father, a resilient daughter, and a loving partner began a fresh chapter. A chapter defined not by betrayal or violence, but by growth, empathy, and a love strong enough to outlast the darkest storms.